First of all, that sure looks good on you, man.
This is my new favorite shirt.
Dude, Data Center Special Forces. Wait, you got to see these new ones we're getting ready to roll out. Like
Yeah?
we just started keep making. Remember this movie?
No.
Glengarry Glen Ross, Coffee's for Closers.
No.
The scene with Alec Baldwin. Always be closing. Coffee is for closers. You never heard that?
I never did. Man, see, I
You
gotta
tech
get out
nerds,
more.
man. You're too busy dealing with climate change.
Not
and...
nerd. Geek is chic. Nerd is not. So.
No, I'm joking, man. So obviously, I doubt that there's many people that are. Well, you know what? I take that back. I love this industry. You know why? Because there's always, like, even at the conference this week, I raise my hand, or I always ask people, I'm like, hey, is this the first time you're at this conference? Is this the first time you've been in the industry? And we are gaining more market momentum and traction as we're getting more people that are flowing in and out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just a function of, there's a small groundswell, which means that, like, when you were me and you got in this industry, there were 6, 7 guys that had the keys to the kingdom, right? And I'm not saying there's
back in the day. Yep.
But I mean, those guys still do, but there are other emerging. It's the succession plan to the leadership. This industry's in its infancy, right? Mm-hmm. Don't you agree?
I do. It's less than 20 years old if you really think about it.
So let's do this. Why don't we start? And I'm gonna fly through hard. And I know that you have a lot of things that you want to cover, but I gotta go. I gotta tell you, I got a lot of questions for you too, because there's a lot to unpackage with all the things that you have with your brain always spinning the way it is. So why don't you start with telling people who you are?
So Dean Nelson, I'm the CEO of a startup company called Cato Digital, and I also founded Infrastructure Masons back in 2016, and that's a professional association of the builders of the digital age. That's us. So basically everybody in the industry and what they do.
So how does one become those things? Like, what did you do prior to that?
Become those things. Oh boy.
How do you become the founder of those two companies that are having a significant impact on the industry, the world? But before that, did you ever work for any other groups, or did you?
Yeah. I'll back up. I have I've been in the industry 33 years now, which blows my mind.
Just getting started then, right?
Yeah, that's it. I'm old now. The gray is showing through the blonde. I started at Sun Microsystems on my 21st birthday. Let me back up from there. So I was that kid in high school who thought, okay, I'm going to graduate. I'll go get a job, make a lot of money.
That's how it works.
Because I was dumb.
And then that will make you happy.
Yeah. Well, and I thought that would be great. And so I joined a company called Manpower.
Of course. Everybody, are they still around?
They're still around, which is crazy. But it's a temporary agency.
Of course.
So they send you to all these different jobs. And I thought,
where are you
great.
from, Dean? Where are you?
I was born in Minnesota, grew up in Colorado, went to school in Arizona, and then I've been in California for 33 years.
Where did you grew up in? What part of Colorado you grew up in?
Arvada, so suburbs of Denver.
And then from there you went to school in Arizona, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Where at?
DeVry. I went to a trade school.
That's fascinating. So I love proving that you don't have to go to like a big bougie school in this industry to still be able to make a difference.
There's so much to that. Let me connect that. I had started at Manpower doing all these different jobs and spent a year doing that. I was sweeping out rock crushing factories in Golden, cleaning the crawl spaces of 50-year-old houses. It just was not the jobs that anybody wanted to do, and they sent us to it. And I realized I'm not making any money. This is not fun at all. And so I went and talked to my dad and said, hey, I want to figure out to do something else. And he said, you were really good in electronics in high school. I aced all the classes. It was easy.
That's just something you liked. You had a passion for it.
It just seemed to be logical, like how the things put together. Different than English and and all other classes. That one just kind of clicked. And so he said, you should take a look at that. And so I went and looked at the trade school.
How old were you then, though? Were you still in high school, or you just graduated? You were
just about 19. Yeah. So I'd already graduated. So I spent a year doing that work and realized that was not going to work.
Were you in Arizona at this time, though?
No, this is in Arvada, Colorado.
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
And then, so I did my mom and I drove over to Arizona and Phoenix and saw the campus and all that, and this is great. So I went and did a 2-year electronics associate's degree. That was great. Then Sun Microsystems came in and hired half our graduating class and said, you're moving to Silicon Valley. I'm like, great. What's Silicon Valley?
And what am I doing? What's Sun Micro?
I didn't know anything. I was just complete novice. So I didn't know operating systems. I didn't know what Silicon Valley was. I didn't even know the term.
Was it even really Silicon Valley then? No. Okay, it already hit.
Yeah,
okay.
It was. If you think about it, 89. So this is the boom
Okay.
where things are really starting to pop. And when I went over to Sun, I went on the manufacturing line and did component level debug of hardware. So the first time I heard what a server was, what storage was,
Shut
what
up.
network interfaces, and it just
That's the first time you did it, and they gave you that job.
yeah, and it was neat because the electronic part of it was what's wrong with this board, and so we had a bone pile, and that bone pile was all the cards that were failing in some way. And so Sun had these things. I remember it. Yeah, it was called a Stingray, a Sun 330, and that 30 was a desk side unit, and they had these slotted modules. And so you pull those out, and you'd figure out why is this one having an error and things. And so we troubleshoot it, fix them, replace different chips, validate, and then they go back out and ship to customers. But I learned a ton.
Dude, that's awesome.
It was the first. I'm really glad I did it that way because
Were you doing repairs though too? Like you would solder the boards back, or
no, we were
just
troubleshooting,
troubleshooting.
and then we go to we had a person that went in there and soldered these correctly and things. But this is back when 1 megabyte of memory was
How
a
big?
lot of money. Like they had 4 megabyte modules, and they were $6,000 each or something.
Wow.
Think about what we got right now. I mean, they're a terabyte in my new phone.
Yeah,
1,000 gigabytes.
it's amazing.
So 1 million megabytes. It's just crazy how that went. But what I loved about that job was I had to learn each piece. And then for me, I love patterns. So if you think about how things work, always curious about the way things connect. And so I started going through all this equipment and realizing, oh, well, there's a CPU. Okay, that's CPU. That's a central processing unit. It's got all these addresses to be able to do what? Pull from memory. And then the memory is actually reaching from getting stored with stuff from hard drives. And that's getting it over the network. All of a sudden, the dots started connecting. And then they put me on different systems. So I started in component level debug. Then I started doing operating systems. Then I started doing network. Then I started doing things. And I learned at Sun. 17 years, 2 stints.
You were there for 17 years. So in that time, I mean, was it them telling you, okay, now you're going to learn this, or was it you being hungry and you're like, hey, can I do more now? Or
it was both. So for me, I'm curious. So I love seeing how things work. And Sun was probably one of the best cultures I've ever been in the industry.
Are you kidding me?
It
That's
was
awesome.
It was a culture.
Where were they out of? Like Redwood City or something? Where
They were in Milpitas, California.
Milpitas, okay.
Yeah, ironically, that's where my startup company is.
Oh, no kidding. Is that where
I
you
didn't even
live?
think about that connection. Yeah, so I moved there first. But what was incredible about the culture with the company is that from the executive level down, it was all about innovation, and they lived it. So they would go back and solve these things. Think about the internet back then. They were the dot and .com. They created, right, 80%, I think, of the back-end systems running the internet, compute-wise, was Sun.
And who were they? Who was their biggest client? Was it like back then was Savvis? Oh, okay. So it was still enterprise. It wasn't operators yet.
Yeah. And then, but you think of all the different things. I remember we got this bid back in, and the sales team and the CIO asked if I would help, and it was this little company called Facebook. And so they were rolling out hardware, and I remember that. And then we had another one right next to us. Was this little company called Google.
Shut up.
And
so that was early stage stuff.
We were having these conversations, and I remember Google came in and they said, we're going to do all this provisioning stuff. Okay, great. Well, we can do that. We can onboard these servers, get you that. And then they said, we can do a few hundred of these a week. And then we need 1,000 servers onboarded a day. A day. Like back then, I'm like, and everyone was just shaking their head going, no way.
Nobody wants that. No one's really going to need it. Yeah.
So this is the beginning of that hyperscale thing. And Google ended up figuring it all out themselves. They designed their equipment. They had like biggest portfolios in the world. But it was just interesting to see how all these different people applied Sun hardware, Sun operating system, and across all these different applications.
Whatever happened to Sun?
So I left Sun after Oracle acquired them.
That's it. Yep.
And that acquisition, it's just different cultures.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I was on the real estate team at that point.
So you were doing site selection?
No, I was in basically, I'd come out of the engineering side. I was in manufacturing, right, the IT side, and then engineering. And in engineering, we had a multi-billion-dollar portfolio globally. And this lady, one of my mentors, she helped me with my career so much, Kelly Palmer, pulled me into this team called TIPO, which is Technical Infrastructure Program Office. And what we had to do was bridge the gap between engineering and real estate and data centers and
Interesting.
labs and server farms and wiring closets and everything else. And so they had a massive portfolio globally. And so they asked us to come in and start to consolidate and expand. So we started creating these consolidated data centers in Santa Clara, Beijing, Prague. It was one of the funnest projects I've ever done. But I was in the real estate team because they held the purse strings.
Gotcha.
That's where the money was actually driving. And so the engineering teams were at the mercy of the team, but there was a loss in translation between them. They didn't speak the same language.
Yeah.
So we bridged that gap, and then we built stuff all over the world.
Where were you at then when you were doing that? I mean,
I was still in California. So,
but when you were building them, what were you building them for? It wasn't for Sun. It was for one of Sun's clients.
No, it was all Sun.
Really?
Everything. And this was I think for me really helpful in my career because we had to solve the problems that customers were going to face in 2 years.
But you had to solve them in your own house.
Yep.
Like.
So density, liquid, right? Modularity, all the things that we're talking about, what was neat is we saw it because the engineering teams were developing these products and they had to go deploy them. And, when you're doing a hardware build cycle, you're spinning chips, you're bending metal, you're doing a lot of things to get this stuff to where it could be functioning when the software and the operating system is on it. So we had to figure out from the facility standpoint, what does it look like from the network standpoint? And so we put all these things together and just had incredible projects.
Who's we? Because it seems like there was an emerging collective of fellow geeks.
Yeah.
That were just trying to figure out how far they could advance and push it, right? And make it work. From a business perspective, like you said, there's always someone that has a purse.
The teams, I think, are
Who's we? Who were you running around back in the day?
All right. So Brian Day was my chief of staff basically back then. And I think he's still at Oracle. And funny enough, his dad hired me.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And I hired him and his brother throughout that thing. Talk about full circle. So Brian Day and Brandon Day, amazing guys. They were just smart, right? Got it. Good people, all that kind of thing. And then Serena DeVito. So I hired her 3 times in her career. At Sun twice and then back into eBay. Amazing lady, just the nicest person in the world, but analytical, right? Engineering, brain. And so she can just go tackle any problem. And then Petr Velocity, he was in Prague. And then Mike Ryan, who is now over at Google, and he's running, I think it's data center design, but he's been there for probably 15 years now, and just doing massive scale. Yeah. Brett, I'm forgetting your last name.
Rogers?
No, no, not football. Brett was in Colorado, so he did a huge amount in the Broomfield data centers that we had. And there's a number of other people at Sun, but the team that came together, that was one of the funnest teams we had too.
So was most of that collaboration was emerging? I mean, it was all coming from within your guys' TPO, but it wasn't like you bouncing into like a Peter at EYP back in those days or something like.
No, no, I take that back. There were a few things. This is when I was introduced to Emerson and Liebert way back in the day. We built something in Newark, California, that was
for Sun.
For Sun. Okay. And it was, again, what we had is a multi-billion-dollar portfolio globally that the engineering, operations, IT, back office, everybody used. And it was just spread out all over the place. So we consolidated that into data centers. And that was really my first jaunt, was to understand, well, how would we put these together? But we had to do it with density.
What were data centers in those days? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but how long ago was this? Is it 20 years? What is it?
We're talking
early 90s?
2000.
Oh, okay.
2003.
And you're still at Sun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, in the middle of that, I went to a startup company called Allegro Networks, and that was awesome. And I did a bunch of lab and engineering stuff there, and then came back to Sun on my second stint. But that's where really the data center stuff, the TIPO program came forward. And we built Santa Clara. That was probably one of the biggest. Broomfield, Colorado.
Were you building your own? Were you outsourcing?
We built everything internally. We had the real estate team. We brought in partners, of course, construction GCs and all that. But
that was the prevalent thing to do those days, right? I mean, everyone was on-prem.
Yeah. And we still have quite a bit of on-prem. People just don't define it the same way.
You just don't talk about it as much as you do all the co-location and cloud stuff now, right?
Isn't it interesting how you think about software is going to kill the data center? That's what they said. It's going to
Where's
eat the
that going to
world.
go?
Then it said the cloud's going to kill the data center. And now they're saying edge is going to kill the data center. What's funny is they're all data centers.
I know.
It physically goes somewhere. And that's what we build. It's just different consumers and different configurations of it.
So in those days, though, because I'm trying to understand the patterns, like you were talking about, how are you building? How are you learning? Is it the people within your ranks are challenging you? Are you tapping into, like, you have 1 million people in your orbit right now that are constantly, I mean, you're in mine, right? How many great ideas did we discover with you and Bill and I just 5 minutes,
Right. Yesterday.
But that's how it unfolds,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And that's what these conferences are necessary for sometimes. So
Yeah.
how were you evolving then?
That collaboration, if you think about when we were building out these different data centers, I remember I met Jack Pouchet and Peter Gross at that period, and that was 2006. So we built a bunch of stuff, 2003-ish, and we're really diving in. And so we had APC back in the day.
I remember that, yeah.
Right? And so now acquired or owned by Schneider. But we were doing all of their modular. So we had containment. We were putting the rear door exchangers and things because we're getting to 16, 17 kilowatts.
But were you driving them to get to that? Where they like Liebert was making evolutional shifts or okay?
Yes, 100%. So we had like they had a Liebert XTV. I don't know if you remember those at all, but they were the ones that went above the racks, and they were an exchange, can't remember.
But you were always at the front of the edge of adopting emerging technologies in our space, right? I mean, like,
yes.
Even when you were at eBay, weren't you the first to put Bloom on the, like, those are the patterns.
And that's the curiosity part.
Yeah. So how did you, I'm learning how you became, like, it's never just the Dean Nelson or Kirkle Fellow or any of those that shows. There's a collection of people.
Totally. And that community ties back into what we do. So if you think about that network that was built, let me put that or connect that dot. So we had the TIPA organization. We're doing this global consolidation. We're working with a whole bunch of partners and suppliers and things on designs and innovation and that. And then, as an aside, Andy Bechtolsheim, you ever heard that name?
Mm-mm.
Employee number 1 at Sun.
Oh no!
Right?
Yeah, I don't know.
So he's the guy that wrote the $100,000 check to Google.
For real.
And they said spelled the name wrong, and it's just a funny story. So, but that turned into a $6 billion return for him.
Okay, can you tell that story? I don't want to hijack shit, but that sounds like a $100,000 check. Whoopsie into 6, whatever.
There you go. This is such an ADD show. I love it.
Don't judge me.
No. That's me. So I'll bounce with you. Andy Bechtolsheim, Serena DeVito, Mike Ryan, myself. Serena was in drawing some stuff up in Newark on the board, and this guy walks in, sits down, and says, "Oh, what are you doing?" And it was Andy Bechtolsheim. She had no idea, and so she's in there and says, "Oh, I'm doing a design with this one," and he had some ideas and things, and then he said, "Oh, my name's Andy," and then he left, right? And she goes back and says, "I met this guy named Andy. He was really nice." I'm like, "You met Andy? Okay, yeah." It was one of those stories, but he's such a down to earth guy. But to back up, he had Sergey and I forgot the other guy's founder's name. Andy is one of those guys that we call him the thinker. So whenever he's talking like this, he'll go back and he's so he ends up being like this constantly, and his brain is going 1,000 miles an hour. And I've watched this on so many different occasions, even with translators, right, in Japan, where he's going back and they're talking technical back and forth. But he wrote a check to help start Google, one of the first seed investors in it. And the story was that he wrote it wrong, and then they named the company that way. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I don't think it is, but that's the rumor of that.
But it's a cool story.
It is. But the fact that, he wrote a check to start Google.
Damn.
And he's done that a number of times.
So he's not stupid.
He's not. Saying. And he left Sun, and then they ended up buying his company because he went and started, I think it was Granted or some other company. But he came back, and we were in the real estate team again. And so everybody's doing the due diligence on the acquisition and integration of the company. And so when he came back in, they had to go figure out, well, how much money have you put in, Andy? He's the founder of the company. He's, I don't know. I think I put maybe $1 million or something. Well, they found out he kept writing checks and other stuff, and he had no clue. And he put in like 10 times that amount.
Oh, wow.
In the company, because they had to do the due diligence to understand, shares and things. But that's just kind of the Andy stories. He, I filed a patent with him, which was probably one of my funnest experiences because Jack Boucher, when he was at Liebert at that point, owned by Emerson, and a few other folks, Mike Ryan, just the team, we all came together and said, we're going to build super dense. So
what's super dense back then? 12?
No, back
20?
then, remember, this is 2000s. It was just 25 kilowatts.
Okay,
then.
so I was say 24, 25.
And everybody was saying that, we need to get to liquid, and like we've been talking about for decades. But we ended up creating this thing called a greenhouse. And that greenhouse was pressurizing the cold aisle and putting these XDV exchangers, right? Air to liquid or liquid to air exchangers, and then making sure we could get to super density. And so we built a bunch of those inside of, so think of the way that actually is put in, you almost have a greenhouse roof around those racks. And so we filed that thing, and that was kind of fun. And then we ended up deploying more and more of the XDV stuff, like Trondheim, Norway. I remember one we did with a double stack, super dense, because there was tons and tons of hardware that we were putting into that data center. But Andy's one of those people that an icon in our industry, has driven more innovation than I can think of from anybody.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is he still pushing?
He's the chairman of Arista Networks. He founded that, right? So again, he's all over the place when it comes down to companies. He's got his fingers in so many different things.
And it sounds like he had a pretty profound impact on you.
He did, yeah. He was. The thing I love about it, this is the kind of guy that is a billionaire, but he has a hard time like getting a new car. Think about that, right? He's wearing jeans. He's just
same old guy.
He's just him.
Yeah,
right?
same person.
You see him at Whole Foods grabbing food, and he's just. I love that because it didn't get to him.
Didn't change his head.
The ego isn't there, and he did it 4 or 5 times. Think about it. Sun Microsystems, massive. Like he was employee number 1. Then you got Arista Networks, you got Granite Networks, you have the investments in Google, as well as other
tech startups probably, I'm sure, out there.
There's at least a dozen different company stories like that with him.
That's awesome.
He loves it. He just keeps going.
That's awesome. So he's basically creating incubator programs that bigger shops will eventually.
He's starting companies
that are getting acquired.
100% focused on solving the technical problem. Because honestly, he could give a shit about the rest of it. Yeah. It'll all happen. But like, what's the solution? And that engineering mind, that curiosity again, goes back into what, how do you break the mold? And this ties back into the culture at Sun about innovation. It's people like Andy, right? And Greg Papadopoulos and Scott McNeely and all these people that really had vision into what the future would be around technology and the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, because
they saw what it could be capable of, and they had to solve for the future of what it could be.
Because that is the foundation. When you think about all the way back from DEC and the other companies that came up, but Sun was a massive mover in where we are today. Without what they did with distributed systems and remote work, and they had a concept called a Sunray back then, where you would have a card. That card you'd plug into a little unit on your desktop, and it would pull your remote desktop to you. This is back in 2000.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
So
how come that's not more mainstream now?
Well, it kind of is when you think about the way that it's done now. The architectures, you can still get remote access to everything.
Yeah, but the security feature of using your card and being able to go into anything that's the topology is native to where you just slide something in, all of a sudden, boom, it's you. I guess you could.
There are definitely systems today. What I was saying is back then, the fact that they had it was revolutionary. So entire companies. So Sun had a remote work thing. You work from everywhere back in the 2000s. Think about that. Like 2005, I was working everywhere. And then the Sunray, I'd go to Prague and plug into a Sunray. And it'd have my desktop and everything else because it's on a server distributed to these different places. And I just got my environment back. Back then.
Yeah, that's a long time ago for that. Yep.
Yep, and not a lot of people had anywhere near that. So Sun was always ahead of their time, and they were able to monetize on a lot of things, but they weren't able to monetize on some things. Like Java, they wrote the Java code. They originated the language that is on every phone.
I had no idea.
It's the underpinnings of so many different things. But just tons of that. Distributed file systems, to security, to operating systems, to high-performance compute hardware.
And then from that point, where did you go to after Sun? The
So I
second
left.
time.
I left again when the acquisition was happening, and that was a like complete opposite culture.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about Oracle, nothing against Oracle. It's just
It is complete
you know,
opposite.
Oracle is extremely successful in what they've built and what they do, and they're innovative in their own way. But they brought in Sun, right, and that just changed the culture. And I ended up leaving and going to eBay.
So how did
eBay
that
Inc.
take place?
Another funny story.
How old was eBay at that time?
So, 2000.
Was Meg?
Nope, she was gone. She'd moved out. John.
She
Forgot his name.
She probably left to go to HP, right?
At that point, I don't know if she was on the board or if she was actually CEO then.
But how did you find your way into eBay?
So one of my mentors, Bob Worrell, was the CIO at Sun, and Kelly Palmer. Right, you're going to hear names.
Yeah,
from
that's
me 'cause
awesome.
Everything about this is relationships and people and belief and helping propel people forward. Kelly brought me in, right, because she believed in what I could do, and then she got me promoted to director. First time becoming an executive, and I said, I don't think I'm ready for that. She goes, you're absolutely ready. Stop. Like, she just pushed me, right? And then from there, she said, go talk to these different people. So Bob Worrell was one of those people, and he had I can still remember his office in Menlo Park, California, and the conversation we had, because it had a profound impact on me. Because he said, okay, I'm going to tell you something, 2 things that you need to really not forget. First is never forget where you came from.
Okay, that's interesting.
And the reason is that you were sitting on the other side of that table.
100%.
You know, and so and then that goes back and it's like, don't get too big for your britches. So if you think about those 2 simple things, and that tied back to like my dad and his relationships and why it was important to, you just got to be a good person. You screw people over, it comes around, no matter what. Mm-hmm. You never know who you're going to work for, who's going to work for you, and you also have no idea the back channel that happens about you.
Exactly right.
And so it was just neat to see that tied together.
Was that the first time you were learning like the diplomacy of the industry? I guess is like there's a hierarchy that almost exists. There was unwritten. Like, listen, when I came into the industry, what year is this that you went to eBay?
2009.
Okay, so I was in the industry for about 4 or 5 years when your name was pretty well known. I think I learned your name early in my career when you went to eBay. Is when I just was so junior in my professional career that I was only understanding the people at this altitude and airspeed. I wasn't up here understanding where the strategic things were. I was still on that very tactical level, being like, okay, so these are the people on the regional base. Yeah. But the strategic stuff is when we started emerging with, I don't know if it's data center knowledge or whatever, but we started having platforms where this information was being distributed so that we can all get a better understanding holistically on what's going on, because it was changing so incredibly fast.
So let me connect a dot there too. Get another pattern. So I attended a leadership summit. Actually, let me back up. So let me finish that story really quick with our ADHD is just bouncing all over.
Perfect.
So Bob Worrell sat down and talked to me with that. Anyways, the tie for that was he was an executive sponsor for a lot of different companies, and so eBay was one of them. So basically, he would be the champion to go in and help eBay solve their problems and things. And so eBay had this bid that they were doing to go build the data center in Salt Lake City, right? Ironically, called Project Topaz.
Topaz.
And so they, he said, "Hey Dean, could you come in?" Because I wasn't on the sales side; I was on the engineering side within the real estate organization. And said, "Could you come in and just help with some of this?" Well, we ended up building that Santa Clara data center. We had over 5,000 people tour that site in 1 year.
Just to see it as an example of this is what
because
we're
it was
building in the future.
Remember the future things when it comes down to density and all the things we have to solve? So we bring people through that. Well, I think it was 83 people or something from eBay, different levels of it, came through those tours. So I was doing constant, conversations with different people. And so he said, "Hey, could you help us out with this bid?" And so they came back with Topaz, and I said, "This is not what we do, but we should recommend some things for them to consider." Because we didn't go design and build data centers for companies, right? Would fill them with the stuff and make them efficient. And so we did that, and I interfaced with a few people. Then I forgot her name. Shoot. The lady that was running operations at that time, she reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, you know this guy named Olivier Sanche. What do you think about him?" I'm like, "Olivier Sanche? I do not know that name." So I went back and looked on LinkedIn, and I realized, okay, he's from AT&T, and he was linked that way. And so I then went back to a guy called Ross Bauckham, and I asked Ross at AT&T, you know, like what this. He goes, "Oh yeah, I told him to connect with you." So Olivier had reached out to me on LinkedIn, did a LinkedIn connection. Well, now here we tie this back together, and she said, you know, we're thinking about hiring him. Okay, I'm like, all right, that's cool. And then she said he's in London. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be in London next week. So I sat down with him, literally at the hotel that's across from the London Bridge, and with Petter Velocity, right, on my team, and we just started talking. And I interviewed him indirectly. Remember that back channel part of it? And he was awesome. And we created a friendship at that point. And then he came over, and he and I collaborated heavily between eBay and Sun. And one of those things I remember is we brought our teams together and we played both sides of the coin. He and I debated that RFP that they put back out about density. Oh, we should spread things out, liquid cooling, or we should use air. And it was great because he and I intensely went back and forth about why these things are right or wrong and things. And but the team was in it, and we weren't debating with them. We were debating with each other. And what happened is it influenced the team. And that was our point.
What did you want to teach them? That you can challenge each other and be safe?
I think it was challenging. It's the innovation part. Okay, well, this is how we've done it. This is the safe part, as you said. Well, how could we do it differently? Because if we don't think about it, remember Mark Thiele, who was talking about at the conference yesterday?
Yeah, great.
We have to think something else, or else we're just going to keep repeating the same things. And so breaking that mold and under constraint, you know? And so what is the constraint? We have too much density. We can't remove the air, so spread it all out. That's not efficient when it comes down to it. Figure out the optimal way you can configure this. Anyways, all that came down to we had this design session, and then we worked directly. My team worked directly with them and just helped them. And because it's the first data center they're built. Mike Lewis was the guy that was running the data center design aspects and engineering. So ironically, Oracle comes in and acquires Sun. And then I started saying, okay, I'm going to go start looking for another role. It was my 40th birthday. And so I went to Hawaii for 3 weeks. But right before that, I talked to Apple. And I talked to Google. And I talked to a bunch of them, like, okay, I'm just thinking about my next career thing. Exploring it all. And I'm going on vacation, so I'll be back. Well, Apple's like, okay, we definitely want to talk that. And in the middle of that one, Olivier sends me a text, and he goes, hey, can you tell me the phone number of Buzz Serrell? I'm like, Buzz, okay, he's over at Apple. I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah, and I gave him the number, and I said, hey, good luck with the interview. As a joke. And he sends back, how'd you know? I'm like, oh, crap.
Just guessing?
Yeah.
Oh.
So then he goes, oh, yeah, I'm going to talk to him. I'm at eBay. Everything's good, all that. He goes, but, why not?
Why not?
So I'm like, oh, yeah, cool, man. Right. And I said, yeah, I'm talking to him, too. So whatever works. And then I go on vacation. So 2 weeks into it, I call the recruiter back at Apple and say, hey, I'll be back. Would you like? And he goes, well, we're pretty serious about somebody else. I'm like, oh, crap.
Uh-oh.
So then I called Olivier, and he was in a panic because he goes, they made me an offer I can't refuse. I'm like, and you should take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Do his best, yeah.
Yeah, and then he goes, wait, why don't you come to eBay? And I'll go to Apple.
Oh, wow.
That's literally how it happened because I'd never even considered eBay. He was there, right?
Yeah.
They don't need me. They've got Olivier. And so then he calls his boss, Mazen Rawashde, and then we ended up that I came back from vacation. We overlapped a week. He put his notice in and then also said, oh, and I got a candidate for you to look at.
So you helped engineer in many ways his departure to create a void for you to go fill. You didn't mean to do that, but that's how it unfolded.
It just happened that way. But
that's crazy.
What was awesome is that the overlap. Think about it. Usually a person leaves and they have to backfill all that. Well, he was leaving, but we ended up flying to all the data centers, including Project Topaz and all that, and did the handoff with the team. And
How
it was
cool is
just
that?
like this because we'd worked together so much.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really easy to do that. And then we just kept collaborating on things. It's just he was at Apple at that point, right?
That's awesome.
All I say, that's how it got to eBay. And unfortunately, Olivier passed very young. He was 43 years old, right? He had a heart attack on Thanksgiving. That was devastating. He had a 9-year-old daughter. And if there's anything for people in this industry to think about is work's good, but do not let it take over your life. Secondly, stay in shape.
You have to stay healthy in this industry because it's so much stress.
And it is so much stress, and that man, yeah. Anyways, it's well, we planted this tree that's huge now in Salt Lake City, right?
That's awesome.
With Olivier's plaque on it. I think about him a lot. He was just one of those very forward French guys that was just a good human. I keep thinking this theme. It's good humans.
That's awesome.
Right? You build a network of people that you respect, you trust, and you want to be around.
That's
right?
amazing. Yeah.
Like a guy named Kirk.
For real. I mean, like you were saying how, you were pretty – it was – some of these leaders are very unassuming, and it's surprising how approachable some of them can be. Like, I was a nobody when I first walked up. I stood in line for an hour like everybody else to go shake hands with Peter Gross at one of my first conferences. And, I mean, you guys were the rock stars. I'll walk around you and Crosby. And, I think Furlong was still, making appearances. I mean, he's kind of outgrown that, it seems like, these days. But
he's so recluse now.
He is. But
he's in Masons. He's driving.
He's one of the most – I worked for a company – where the CEO was friends with Tom, and when he passed, Tom was one of the first guys that I reached out to, and he, made a really nice statement, to go into the announcement. But I remember the first time I met him, I was an email that was sent from Mark DiStefano, who I don't know if you remember that name, but he was back in the original days with Nova when they were building all the Equinix or Savvis stuff. And, and I get this note, and I didn't realize who Furlong was. He's like, "Yeah, come on out. I'm having lunch with him at the Facebook campus designed by the Disney Imagineers or whatever." And that was my first time on a Facebook campus.
Yeah.
He's introducing me to like Jay and Darren Dasker, all these
Dasker,
celebrities in the space. And I'm like, how are these are the most unassuming, humblest, nicest.
They're awesome people. Yeah.
I was stunned when I hung out with Darren for the first time because I'm like, first, he's a monster of a man.
He's huge. He's a tall guy.
He is a huge dude.
Yeah.
So, and he's just one of the nicest guys who genuinely listens and talks and genuinely, and I was just not used to that because the industry it's still so new that the celebrities of the industry seem so far away. There wasn't magazines like this one yet that were just making, the getting the messaging and the information out, because you visionaries at some point would need others to help bring the vision to life. So we have to understand what your vision is too, and no one's going to understand like you do, right? So we have to put the puzzle together ourselves. These magazines help.
And this is where, if you think about good teams, visionaries are awesome, but they can't get anything done without execution.
You need teams to do it.
And there's a different mindset. And I'll give you a story about that. Mike Lewis was a guy that was doing the RFP, right? He and I, when I came back in, were doing this. And I didn't know why. But I was driving him crazy.
Because you were pushing him outside of his comfort zone on what you're going to deliver?
Not necessarily. He was open to try different things, but he was literally the polar opposite of me. So think about you and I, extroverts, right? We're energized by people, that type of thing. So I'm an ENFP from a Myers-Briggs standpoint, right? Hardcore extrovert, right? Feeler, perceiver. And so like that profile of a person. And so he's an ISTJ. Literally the polar opposite on every front. So I have this lady named Wendy Zito. I brought her into a number of companies, and she does a lot of these team building activities when it comes down to profiling a team and understand how people work. And that helps me a ton because, first off, they can understand me, but more importantly, I can understand them. And then you realize how you work with people. Yeah. So with Mike, the example of that was we'd sit down and I'd be doing this one. Like, with this, we could do this one. What about that? We could design like this one. Driving him crazy. Why? He's an operational guy. He's an engineer that wants to have this like that.
He's linear. You're abstract.
Right. Yeah. And I went 100 different directions, and he's thinking he has to do them all. And so once we made that simple connection, I made one statement before we went in. It's going to be, I need you to think with me. You're not doing anything. Think with me. That's it. He's like, and he removed all that stuff. And then we just did a bunch of stuff. And then it was like, all right, now how are we going to do that? Now it's about execution. And so that whole thing about the relationships. Now think of the teaming aspect. If you hire a bunch of people that are just like you, great.
This groupthink, you have limits.
Yep. And this is the whole point of diversity. Diversity of experience, of background, of influence, right? Of thinking. That allows you to be challenged on so many levels, and you come up with a better solution.
Yeah, I agree.
Debate is good. Respectful debate is good. You know what I mean? That's a little caveat.
Yeah.
But in the end, that part, I think, in all the different teams I've had is the thing that I appreciate the most. These are people I respect, right? Even when there's tough times. That's like and then the other one is how many times people will choose to work for me again.
Yeah.
Indicator, you know what I mean?
If you're a strong enough leader, then they're going to follow you. If not, then they're going to.
Yeah, it's just like me. If I was going to go work for somebody, are they an asshole? Nope. Life is too short to worry about trying to go back. Oh, I have to have that opportunity. Screw the opportunity. There's 1,000 opportunities. Figure out who you're going to work with.
That's
your
important.
Team and the people, the leaders. And if you don't respect those leaders, you're going to get exactly what you think.
That's really profound because a lot of people don't view it like that. They're not looking at the opportunity as the opportunity to grow and scale and, professionally develop, which is what their primary objective should be. More, it's like, how do I get comfortable with the right salary or the right whatever? And you're like, that's the wrong way to view the opportunity from day one, minute one. You're destined to fail.
I agree with that too, because if I look at my career, I really loved my jobs, challenges and different things, right? But that curiosity that keeps coming in, I love to figure out what's next. I love to think about the new things, and I love to be able to jump in and say, that's not solved. Huh. Great. Let's get a whiteboard. Let's figure something out. And teams are just energized by that, to go back and try different things, because when you can let an engineer be an engineer and not constrain them, or any level or any type of role, when you let them do their job,
let find new creative solutions. You mean?
Give them the I guess, creative avenue. In other words, you're giving them approval. And I'll give you an example of this. Remember the Bloom fuel cells you brought up. So this is Peter Gross and I.
Yeah.
Long story on that, but I went in and I was seeing about Bloom and what was happening, and I just seen this emerging trend around the fuel cells. And so I went back to our engineering team, and we're designing the next phase of Utah. And I said, what do you guys think about fuel cells? Oh, no, we can't use that one. I'm like, okay, so there's a whole bunch of, we know that's not what we do and those things. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. You guys have 2 weeks. I want you to take the designs completely off the table. Wipe that whiteboard clean. I'm giving you permission to take 2 weeks. Think through, investigate that, and see if there's anything here
that can be changed or improved or evolved on, or
design. Just literally, now you have the
ability. They have an
ability.
objective where they're like, I want you to get me to a higher density with a lower PUE. I mean, like, I arbitrarily making shit up. But
we already had that. So think of, like, we had to get density, we had to get efficiencies, we had to have modularity, we had mobility, all those things. Take those factors of what you're looking for, but now think of it the other way. How do we get more efficient? How do we get more sustainable as well? Because we were in Utah and it was 96% coal. It was cheap power, but it was coal. And how do we go back and support that? So then you get Bloom fuel cells with natural gas, and all of a sudden you just drop 60% of that. So there's a bunch of different angles in that, right? And so in that 2 weeks, there's a guy named James Monahan who worked with Mike Lewis. James is now overrunning all the operational engineering for Meta in their data centers, right? Great guy. I've hired him 3 times as well, right?
Nice.
And so anyways, we brought the team together. They went back, and then when they came back, he and Sean Tugwell, ironically, same kind of thing, right?
One of my favorites, yeah.
Sean, Rich Ryer, Tom, all these different people, they came back and said they were convincing me on why we should do it.
So they were championing certain
I had no
solutions.
idea what was going to come out at the other end.
That's awesome.
But that's what I mean, is that when you can let engineers be engineers, when you can let leaders be leaders, you can let the people that you've hired to do things, do them.
But you have to challenge them. You have to give them a challenge and a construct, like, hey, you have 2 weeks.
Right.
Date-related motivation. Get something rolling.
True. But you give them that ability to try. And so what happens? We build the world's first data center with primary power from fuel cells. We cut the actual building size in half. We removed a whole bunch of electrical distribution. We had no generators.
So that was that's really when you came on scene. Your name was prevalent, obviously, but now I'm like, okay, so this is one of those groups that's trying to be cutting edge in everything they're doing. They're trying to push.
Very different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just being different to be different. It has to solve a business problem.
Well, think about this. It was eBay.
Yeah.
And eBay at the time was like before now it's Amazon or something, but eBay was where everybody went to get everything that you couldn't find.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. That was
But
where
and
you went.
eBay's still huge when it comes down to it, right? Yeah, Amazon's marketplace is bigger, of course. But yeah, I understand. eBay was what was neat about that was we knew what we were doing for the product outside, and we knew that we had to translate that back into efficiency internally because every transaction on the site is consuming power, right? There's a certain cost per unit. And so we ended up driving the efficiency here that data center, when we shut it, when we rolled this out, we had, the natural gas conversion and all of the power, 10 megawatts of fuel cells.
Yeah.
We used all of the power 150 feet away.
My thing was I was in the ecosystem. I was like probably a project manager at Eaton or a service engineer but I do remember thinking, I go, how does a business like eBay, who could quantify the downtime by a second of, by lost $1 million of, they're the largest e-commerce at the time probably, right? And I'm like,
It was big.
a company that literally doesn't have a shingle, whose business is based on the internet, is now operating in a time where everybody was focused on reliability.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to fuel cells.
Yeah, that was
no gens. And I was like, what the?
What are you guys thinking?
So imagine, I didn't understand. I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Everything that I've been learning since I've been in the industry for 4 or 5 years now is reliability is not the number one thing anymore. So now it's about efficiency and advancing. I mean, Mark was talking about it at the conference this week. He's like, okay, so we have supply chain issues with gens. Cool. Find a solution without gens. Then there's no longer a problem.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, well, we haven't thought about that paradigm shift. Where, can you imagine? I mean, it's the same as the early days where you're trying to tell someone, hey, you're going to need an uninterruptible power supply. Like, why the hell would I need that? I have all these things. And then go back to them a year or two later, be like, you actually need two now. And they're like, wait a second. You know what I'm saying?
Hold on. Yep.
And then you're like, hey, this guy manages the tech environment for the largest e-commerce in the world probably at that time that was at least on our radar in America. And he's actually ripping generators out and putting fuel cells on the roof or sort of thing. And I was like,
yep. Not on the roof. We did containers on the roof in Phoenix.
That's what it was. All right.
But if you look at the fuel cell side, so first let me challenge a few.
How did you get into that? Yeah.
This thing with the removing the generators. So James Monahan again did a probability analysis, okay, of fault. So we had the utility itself as far as its reliability. We had the natural gas pipelines in terms of their reliability, and then we had the fuel cells. Think about it. There are a whole bunch of distributed little units. You don't lose 10 megawatts. You lose cells.
Components,
which just degrades the amount of capacity you can provide. Okay,
not the reliability.
So you lose that. But if you look about it, it all goes down to that resiliency is now based on a reliability factor. That reliability factor is still going to say what's the probability of fault in these systems that will cause that actual thing to happen. And so when he did all that analysis, we realized this is actually going to be more resilient.
Interesting. Did you have an engineering firm peer review that with you guys?
Yep.
Okay.
It was I forgot his name.
EYP probably.
No, I presented this with James at a 7x24 conference. I forgot his name. But he did fault tree analysis on tons of things, and that was an eBay presentation specifically around this. But the point being that we're not giving up the other side. We're just creating a different solution that happens to be cheaper, right? And more efficient and more sustainable. It's because we challenged the status quo when it came to, well, you have to have generators. You have to have the electrical distribution in this way. You have to have it that way. When all of a sudden you're at that point, you realize maybe it's time to challenge it.
It's just the optics, yeah. You think, though, because that's the way we've always did it.
Yep. And
so that was your incubator that really allowed you to kind of grow your wings and test the norm of the industry and figure out how you could advance the norm.
I think it was a little different. Sun was definitely the incubator because it was wide open. We could test and play and partner and do whatever we wanted because we knew exactly what we had to solve for. Next gen products. Yeah, next gen. And so when we went to eBay, now it was we're a customer of Sun. We're a customer of HP, Dell, right? Lenovo, all the others. And so now we have to solve the problem for another layer, which is the application. Okay. And that's where, do you remember the DSE metric? You ever heard that? So I published this back in 2012, I think it was. So digital service efficiency. Okay. The reason for that metric was we translated the application draw inside of an eBay and PayPal and StubHub and all the other companies we had. And we translated that back into kilowatt hours of consumption. So we had a transaction per kilowatt hour.
Interesting.
Okay, and the reason this is, it sounds so simple, but what's a transaction? Okay, everybody's got a different transaction. For us, it was a page view. And I'll get to why this is important. A page view basically is when you pick up your phone and you do something, this is sending out a bunch of requests. So what's the common way? Everybody's IP traffic. But for this one, we would go do a page view, whether you're doing an email to a seller, you were posting an item, you were searching for something, they all translated to page views, which means that, the hundreds of millions of people around the world that were using eBay and PayPal would all come into the site, and then when they put their request in, that would translate to a page view, and that would now initiate a whole bunch of stuff behind it. Okay, well, there's my numerator. How many page views have I had? Well, then what's my denominator? Well, how many kilowatt hours were consumed to serve those page views?
Yeah.
So that concept, it took us 2 years. Jeremy Rodriguez was another guy on the team, and he's over at NVIDIA right now building out their hyperscale.
Tons of data.
Massive. Like they are the densest in the world when it comes down to compute, right? So he drove density at eBay and the hardware team and all that. It was incredible. But now when you think about it, he and I went back and dove into all this data around what's going on the site. And so that's what came out was transactions per kilowatt hour. Then you flip it around and say, well, if I got whatever it is, a billion transactions happening, and I'm consuming 190 megawatts of capacity, so I'm doing that, right? How many kilowatt hours are associated with that? Then I flip it over and say, well, I know my total cost, so what's my cost per transaction? Then what's my carbon emitted per transaction?
Interesting.
What's my revenue per transaction? So that was the DSC metric, which is a multi-dimensional view, but you had to have a common denominator and a numerator to get it to work. That was 2 years of trying to figure out exactly how that goes together. But what that did is it connected our world, the physical world, to the actual service that's going outside. And then from there, we could start making decisions. Because you're either going to make a trade-off on how much you're spending and the revenue conversion that comes from it, or how much you're consuming or not consuming and the efficiency or inefficiency that comes from it. It just gave a totally different perspective from the CFO, COO, CTO, right? And the CSO perspective.
Having that transparency, I could see how it could take 2 years. But once you're with that, if it took 2 years to arrive to that value and understanding how that makes a difference, how did you educate the industry with that? How did you get other people to begin to view it through the same optics?
Transparency. That was 100%. How do we go back and share this information? And
Because
then, by the way, that's when I met Tom Furlong.
Oh, no kidding.
Very first meeting. Yep. We went to Facebook. Get this. At that time, it was at the Menlo Park campus. Mm-hmm. That was the old Sun Microsystems campus.
Oh, so it's like going home for you?
Yeah, and we went in there, and then on the back of the Facebook sign, thump sign, there's the Sun logo. They leave it on there.
Yeah.
They leave the stuff on the backs of the doors to the building. And you know why they said they did that? They said, never forget that you can be irrelevant. Because Sun was acquired and Sun went away. Sun's no longer there. They did tons of things, right? But Sun doesn't exist anymore, right? So anyway, that's
a smart reminder. Actually, it's pretty clever.
Yeah. But Scott McNeely was the CEO of Sun. He went over and I interviewed him at an iMasons event in 2018, and we talked about this. And he goes, "Oh, Zuck." He goes, I had to go remind him because he told the story, same thing to Scott, right? And that was his old house, if you think about it.
Sure.
The campus. And he goes, I just reminded Zuck that you would not be here without us. What we did in the past, there's no way that you could do what you're doing if we had not innovated and broke the mold on so many things so that you could actually advance and become Facebook, period, right? And which is true.
That's
foundation.
That's all I say is you visionaries have great shit, but you're not going to bring it to life without everybody else solving for those problems.
Great ideas, but implementation is, I would say, even more important. We got to think about how things can happen, but great. If you don't put it into action, you're just talking a lot.
So I've always been a student of the game. So let me share with you from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And from the optics, from a junior person in this industry who's trying to analyze and interpret these trends in the market in real time. And there's celebrities like you and the Furlongs and the Timmons, and there's
I'm just a geek, man. It's like,
but you
keep
guys
using celebrity, like, yeah.
But the thing is, this is everybody knew your name, and what I saw was a guy that was in, like, the data center. To me, was when you start off in the ecosystem, you're a ripple effect of a purchasing decision that's made a long time ago back to the data center owner operator or the enterprise that's building it for themselves. But before that, there's another, that's a ripple effect of another decision that took place upstream that stack that comes back to technology, which is driving whatever the aggregate compute demand, scalability, or future is going to look like, and how do we solve for that in the future. And then obviously that ties back to somebody making a financial decision. But trying to understand each of those phases and where everything was a ripple effect of the other. For me, on the outside, I saw you as the guy that was trying to bring these two things together, right? Where, hey, we can't just build what they tell us to build for anymore and operate around these things. We have to understand why we're going to that, and there needs to be more of an exchange. It sounds like you were even taking it another step and bringing operations people in and saying, yeah, it's great to have these crazy designs, but they still have to be maintained with the integrity of, sustainability, reliability, and all those other things. But for me, I was getting that from the people that I worked for. And I remember the first time I met you at a Cyrus One hosted. This could have been one of the early, did you host, like, when did you start iMasons?
2016.
Where were you when you did it? Were you at Uber or at PayPal?
In between
or eBay?
eBay and Uber.
Okay.
But we also started a group called Data Center Pulse.
I do remember that too.
Back in the day, yeah.
But I remember
it was Mark Teeley and I.
Okay.
And we drove that. That grew really rapidly.
Because you guys were hosting meetings out of other data center operators. Because I met you when I was at Cyrus One, and you came up and you're like, hey, what's your name again? And you took my picture and you made a contact right in real time.
Yeah.
That changed everything, because I was like, I'll just do that all the time. I remember I saw you again later, and
okay, Kirk. Now I got to test my system here.
But I saw you like a long time later, like a couple years later, and you're like, yeah, Kirk. And you pulled it up and you're like, we met on this date at this place, and here's the photo from it. And you showed me, and I was like, damn, how does a guy maintain that level of discipline when trying to manage the number of people that you're exposed to?
It is really funny when you think about, so.
You pull it up and you're like, whatever year, 20.
Yep, and I got your photo, and like, it just is.
But it was crazy to me, and I was like, damn, dude, I have to step my game up and figure out how I'm going to manage these people because Peter, I chased down Peter at a conference just because he was, the burning bush for a lot of things too.
He's Peter. Yep.
And I remember walking up to him, just standing in line like everybody else, and I was stunned how easy and approachable he was. And I remember just asking him questions. I think I even followed him into the bathroom once or some shit like that. I was not, if you can't imagine that, give me another hour, Dean, and you'll believe that. But I was that relentless to try to understand the space more, to where I was like,
sure.
I think I did actually follow him into the bathroom. And but my thing was, I was trying to understand these players and be like, where are they going? What are they doing? Like, I don't understand, because I feel like there's things that you want us to rise to and execute to. And I feel like every time that we got to something, you guys were not changing the goalposts. We're like, hey, don't get too comfortable, because now that we're reinventing ourselves all over again. So, and I learned that originally all professionals, like, that's uncomfortable. And then I was like, man, that's actually more comfortable being uncomfortable, because now I know that I'm honestly constantly have to understand, why are these densities shifting? Why is the topology getting smaller while the capacity is getting higher? And it had nothing to do with what we were trying to solve for in the delivery of the data center environment. It was everything upstream. And for you to be effective on this level, you had to understand that side too. And a lot of people don't.
Yeah, that translation and it's very easy to get caught in that.
But how? And for me, there wasn't a lot of framework. I mean, now it's way easier for us to educate, because there's some amazing publications that we could tap into, and like these ones specifically, and we'll go into this one. This isn't like a regular magazine. This one actually has a lot of really in-depth
meat.
It
meat
is.
in it. Yep.
This is where you could be educated, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I spent a lot of time reading this stuff all the time in the evenings, and be like, damn, I haven't seen the ball since kickoff sometimes. You think that, because I'm like, I just figured this shit out. What do you mean we're changing it again? Why slow down? I'm just getting good at this. But it was you jerk, you geeks that were like, no, because there was all, chicken coop. There was so many things being built. I'm like, man, we are just, everything was iterative, and we are still, I think it was awesome. It was like the Wild Wild West. I think it kind of in many ways still is.
It is. We have not solved all these problems.
Oh no, because even if we think we did for like IoT, then you had a problem with cloud, then you have a problem with all the emerging stacks that are coming now, right?
Yep.
So when you were doing the data center pulse as a stepping stone to get to iMasons. So what was the genesis behind that?
So we had, well, let me go back to Sun for a second. 2008, I attended that innovation summit, and in that summit, Jonathan Schwartz was the CEO at that point, and he's talking, and I don't know, there's 500 people in the room, executives, all different levels in the company, and he's talking about community. We got the Java community, we got the Solaris community, we have the Spark community and all this, and I'm thinking, they're going, what's my community? I don't have a community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I do, but I don't. And so there's no way for me to connect to that. And so I remember that weekend, that was a Thursday when I heard it. By the end of that weekend, I said, we'll create one. So I said, all right, well, it's data centers. We need to get the pulse on data centers. So I created Data Center Pulse. And I created a LinkedIn profile, like all this stuff, and then I called Mark Teeley, right? And I said, "Hey, I'm putting this together. What do you think?" Yep. So he jumps in, and then we went to 6,000 people in over 130 countries, like that.
That's awesome.
Because there wasn't a community. I mean, we had 7x24 and AFCOM, and think of all the different groups, but we didn't have a formal community. And so, and we spent 6 years, doing that. That was during the right out of Sun, then I went into eBay. And do you remember the chill off?
What was that? I just may not remember.
This is, right in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. We created this challenge. And the chill off was to say, let's go compare all these different cooling technologies and see what the results are. So we had everything from direct touch heat removal. And this was a thing called... oh boy, I totally forgot. It's still on YouTube. These videos are on there. But we're very public about it. And we had all these different technologies come in. And then we had a Sun event where we published the results. So Liebert XDVs were in there, rear door exchangers, Rital it was just...
So you were aligning which mechanical permutation lent itself to whichever density or whichever applications.
Because we had density in the hardware that we needed to solve for. And so we had a lab at Sun. We put all these together. And eBay was in it as well. Olivier saw some things. And so we did a bunch of those things and published that. But during that period, right before that's when Data Center Pulse started. And then we started coming together in these meetings. I think that's where we might have met.
Okay. Yeah.
Was at a Data Center Pulse type thing. But then when I came into eBay, we were doing a bunch of that. Matter of fact, we did public RFPs for Project Quicksilver, for Project Mercury, for like that. And we did that on purpose because we said, we got a lot of ideas, but we need the industry to think with us.
Or to tell us, like, there's things that are existing or available that you may not have known. So you were trying to draw in everything that's available at that time.
What's cool is think about our other ones when you let engineers be engineers. I still to this day, matter of fact, at the conference, people talk about Project Mercury in Phoenix. And they said, I love that because the shackles were off.
You're allowed to do anything you want as long as it's the best idea.
Yeah. And we were saying, please go back and break the mold. Come back with something. Yeah. Here's what we need to achieve. And then all these firms, engineering firms, everybody got all excited about it. We had a ton of submissions in, and they all came in and presented, right? And we had a short list. We had to select a winner within that. But in the end of it, the designs had a ripple effect. Because what they did here, they started doing to other customers. Even though they didn't win that bid, you see their designs rolling out in all these different places.
It's a lot of introduction, yeah.
That was cool. That was really cool. But during all that, then I got so busy at eBay because it just went...
Yeah, of course.
It went through the roof because it was a turnaround when we came in, right? At 2009, the company would come back and recovered.
Well, at what point, too, didn't they... was there an acquisition of PayPal? Or there was something to where
PayPal was there already.
Okay.
2002, I think, is when they acquired them. But that's another story. They had a Topaz story. John Donahoe is the CEO at that point. So that's when Meg had left, right? John is one of those people that I respect quite a bit. And Bob Swan, so the CEO and CFO, they allowed me to do a lot of things. Same exact principle. Okay, what do you got? Go figure out something. So fuel cells, they supported it financially, innovation, the breaking the mold, like on so many different levels. Well, anyways, we flew out to Utah and we're having this conversation because we're talking about sustainability, the results inside of the Utah data center. And Peter Gross was there. We did interviews and different things. But on the way back, this is the first time I got to jump in the corporate jet. I got to fly with John, right?
Oh, wow.
That was kind of fun. And so as we're going back, he does that that CEO question. And I would say anybody who's an executive, you can ask this question to anybody on your team. You're going to get a lot more than you expect.
What's this question?
What am I missing?
Oh, easy question.
That's it. No, not easy.
Well, no, I mean,
Well, it's a simple question.
Most people don't ask that question.
Right, exactly. But the reason he did that was he did not want to dictate the direction of the conversation and the answer with his own biases. What am I missing? And so I'm sitting there thinking, going, okay, well, this is what the CEO of the company, and I felt comfortable that I wasn't going to get myself in trouble. We're open and transparent. It's a great culture again. And I said, I think you're wasting a lot of money with having eBay and PayPal as separate entities. He goes, what do you mean? I said, it's been 10 years and we have completely isolated infrastructure. They have their own stack, their own data center deployments, their own thing, but they're all in the same building, but they're completely different.
Yeah.
And so we're spending a lot of money on that, and I don't understand why.
I would imagine there's risk in that too, if you're trying to maintain the integrity of two different siloed.
Well, there's also safety in it because now one doesn't affect the other. Okay. So, I mean, there's both sides to all this.
Yeah,
But,
I guess.
well, anyways, I did that, and then he's like, oh, okay, all right. And then we talked a little bit more. We got on the plane, came back. And then we had a leadership meeting. And in that meeting, so all the VPs and the senior directors and things are in the room in the C-suite. And John gets up and he goes, all right. I forgot his name. The CTO of eBay at that time, Mark. He said, Mark, we're going to consolidate eBay and PayPal infrastructures. Sri Sivananda is going to lead the project. I'm sitting there going, crap.
That was your idea, and now you just burdened two senior executives.
But what was neat is, I'm sure they talked about it or something, but the seed was planted. It was just, all this came down to is awareness. Okay. And so if you're asking people on your team and you ask that question, you're going to get a lot more than you bargained for.
What am I missing? Yeah.
As long as they trust you enough to be able to tell the open truth around it. And it's hard to hear in a lot of times, right? But what happened there is Sri Sivananda is now the CTO over at PayPal, right? Well, we spent 15 months integrating eBay and PayPal infrastructure. There were 21 instances of independent cloud deployments inside of each of the organizations. Got it to one, right? We consolidated all the hardware and the standardization. This is where Jeremy Rodriguez and his team came in and started designing up density and all that. And this is so that merge of all of it. And then, this is so funny. I'm out talking on the circuit with all these things about the efficiencies and the gains, and look at all the stuff we're doing. It's really fun. But I'd flown to DC, and I was at the White House event talking about sustainability.
How long ago was this?
This is in 2014 or 15,
okay.
Right? And so I'm there, and I wake up in the morning, 5 a.m., right, getting ready for this one, and there's an announcement that says eBay and PayPal are going to split. Like five people in the company knew about it. John Donahoe, Bob Swan, that kind of thing. And so I'm like, crap, wait a minute.
We just merged their infrastructure.
We just did all this stuff. And I happened to be at a White House event with press. I got to get prepped yesterday.
For sure.
So I'm calling people up anyways. But then we spent the next 10 months separating that infrastructure. Right? And everyone's like, oh, what do we have to do? But then I reminded them all that, okay, look, but we were better together before. And now it's actually better for the companies to grow independently because they were saying they're going to be two independent internet giants. And so because eBay and PayPal and the way they did their transactions, you check out with PayPal, but it also limited the ability to work with an Amazon and a Walmart and others because it was tied together,
sense.
Right?
Yep.
So the logic made sense of how they would do it. And but then we spent that time, and I would tell you that was probably one of the most challenging projects of my career, probably one of the funnest. I never want to do it again. Separating a $224 billion commerce value company, that's how much transaction volume.
They're massively different companies. One's an e-commerce and one's a bank. One's a currency, basically, right? So that's got to be crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, we did that separation, and and it went off flawlessly. A lot of work. Tons of people did incredible work in that. But we were able to build up all brand new infrastructure for PayPal, right? And then the teams separated. So Rich Ryer, Sean Tugwell,
those guys
Tom,
went PayPal.
like all of them went over on this side, and I stayed on the eBay side. And then my boss, Sri Shivananda, went over to PayPal as well.
Did your boss and was there something that still tied it all back together to where
They were still together. They had a operational agreement for 7 years because there's still transitions, but within that 10 months, because you can't get out of data centers. And
did you kind of have
everything
one that
that
was a
fast.
colo, like one was leasing?
Yep.
Okay, that's
yeah,
how
and that's what happened in Arizona and Utah is one lease from the other.
Yeah.
And so, but it was beneficial. So it was reversed in both sides.
Sure.
And so, and that just finished 2 years ago, I think it was,
Oh, wow.
or a year ago, something that agreement was all done. So, and you know Eddie Shooter, right? So another thing, so many names. Eddie was at AT&T. Eddie knew Olivier Sanz. He worked for Ross Bauckham and that type of thing. When I was at eBay, I was looking for a network director and a data center director. And so, and I'm asking Eddie, do you know anybody? He goes, well, what about me? I'm like, Eddie, you? What are you talking about? Like, I should work for you. And he goes, no. I could do both jobs if you want. I'm like, huh. And we're at a restaurant in Saratoga, California. And then fast forward, right, he came over. And then I ended up leaving and going right on sabbatical for 6 months before I went to Uber. And he took my job.
Now,
and it was awesome.
That is awesome. In that 6 months, were you touring? Like, your daughter is a musician, right? And you're a musician. So I saw, what was that song that you guys did? It was like a Journey song. What was that song that you guys...
No, it was a Rainbow in the Dark.
That's it. Who is that?
That is Ronnie James Dio.
That's it.
Yeah.
That was a pretty awesome cover that you and your daughter did that, by the way.
Thank you.
But
she was 15 then. That was...
Now, didn't you take time off? You were like, your daughter was on tour or something like that, and you're like, I'm going to go watch my daughter crush it or something like that, right? Is that that window that you were doing that 6 months, or is that a different window?
Actually, that's a different window.
Oh,
so in between eBay and Uber, my daughter was looking at colleges. So I left and spent 6 months, and we flew all over the place and all that. That was great. She chose USC and went down to LA. But then I went into Uber, and then I left Uber on my 51st birthday, by the way.
How long were you there for?
A little under 3 years, I think.
Okay. So you left on your birthday?
Yeah. And then that's when we followed her on tour. My
Oh.
wife and I.
Well, but you also had, by then, I'm not sure, is Pulse still around, Data Center Pulse?
No, so Data Center Pulse stopped. And matter of fact, actually, that's it. 2016, in between there, I realized all that activity, I'd lost touch of the community in the last part of eBay because we were doing integration.
Because you were so busy, you
and
lost the
separation and all that. Lost the pulse. There you go. Bada bing. So then I said, well, okay, why don't we start something else? And that thing, I thought, it's more than data centers because data centers is an element. It's the stack.
It's the infrastructure. Yeah.
It's digital infrastructure. And so it was great because Eddie and I were flying up to Microsoft, right, and transitioning things within because we were doing some stuff with Azure and programs. And on those plane rides, I had my entire team. Sean Tuggle was there and all that.
Yeah.
I was saying I'm thinking about starting something like this, and we were talking about we're kind of the Masons they built the the cornerstones of and all this. And I said we're kind of like the builders of that digital age now.
That's
we're
pretty cool.
The infrastructure Masons, and so that's
is that where the
this all
name
started.
came? You and Eddie sitting around having a drink and
Eddie and I have a different recollection, but I'm going to give him props. We had conversations, but on the plane ride, I went and rolled that all together into. I had a concept of what we wanted to do, but then the name, and I'm pretty sure he influenced me on how that would work because we had a Masons conversation, and then it turned into this.
And what was the genesis? What was the objective of it? It was to regain the pulse, I guess, or to
it was first to get the community back together, but it was also that we didn't want to repeat some of the things that did not work in other organizations. And I'm not bashing anybody, but the number one thing that I found in a lot of things that we did, think of the Green Grid, AFCOM, 7x24, et cetera. Specifically in the Green Grid, the challenge was they were doing a lot of innovative things and driving standards work in that. It was good stuff. And Eddie and myself and Ben Stewart, right, from NTT, and Dennis from Disney, right? Like we were all on the end user group inside of.
But you guys all shared the
Green
same
Grid.
challenges. It seems like.
But the thing is, we found that they were very limited inside of the Green Grid because it was structured for the companies, meaning that the bylaws were set that you could not do certain things. So Intel and think of all the companies in there, we could not. And as buyers and end users, we're thinking, why are we so limited? This is we should be able to drive some things. And so that influenced the infrastructure mason side in that we do not want to be bound by companies. So we created a professional association, a 501c6. And Mark Monroe, do you know him? He's at Microsoft working for Christian right now.
Okay.
He was at Sun with me. We drove sustainability when sustainability wasn't cool.
Yeah.
Back in the day, right?
Why were you so focused on it back then?
It was just, when you get exposure to something you'd never had before, and then you can not see it.
So it just
I realized that there's what we do has an impact, and that was 2008, 2007, 2008, and Sun again was ahead of the game. They said this is about ecology and economics, and you should not have to trade off one for the other.
Fair enough. That should be the standard.
It needs, but at that point, the economics drove everything, and this was a nice to have, the altruism of sustainability. But they had not come back to solutions that say, I'm solving both sides of that coin, both sides of that problem. You have to, and that's where we are today. But if you fast forward into this, so Mark Monroe set up the structure. Again, visionary
of infrastructure masons.
He set up the operational thing and made this stuff actually come together. Really, really, really important step. Because if not, we would not be here without Mark Monroe.
So all that framework that he put together, you had to just go out and find the right people that.
Actually, it's pretty simple. First was, I'm going to structure something, and it's going to be a professional association driven by the members, the people. Because it's all about those relationships. Period.
Yeah, I agree.
People switch companies, work for different people, all that. Like, it is about those people and the continuity of those people's participation. Because if they leave a company, you shouldn't just say, oh, sorry, you're no longer important. Yeah, that's an important person. I don't care who they work for. I want that person and their experience. So we created the structure that way, and that way it was that the companies could participate, but they had no decision authority.
Yeah, they're just contributing with information or content or data.
And then we had all of these different people, and that started blossoming. But I made 9 phone calls.
Yeah, who were those 9?
So I called Rob Roy at Switch. I called Eddie Shooter, Tom Furlong, Joe Cava, Christian Bellotti, Peter Gross. Was
Jim Smith one of the originals?
Jim Smith. He's at Dell.
Ty?
Jeez,
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ty.
Yeah.
And I'm missing one. Anyways, I called those 9 people and I said, hey, look, I'm thinking about putting something together. And they challenged me. They're like, well, what's different?
What's the point? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember Joe Cava saying, okay, to what end? We're going to come together to do what? For what reason? To what end? And so I thought about that quite a bit. And then Christian said, I don't want to get on stage and just agree with everybody.
Yeah.
We're going to debate? I'm like, yep.
I think like every one of those names you just said was capable of wanting to debate, right? Like, they wanted to challenge it.
And all of those people I respected, and I knew them. You know what I mean? Like they had just what they did, the way they ticked. And so if we could bring that back together, I said, I just want to get my friends back together and have a conversation and start driving things. And so that's what it started. I had no, aspirations of having what we have right now. It was, let's just get these people together because we can do some things. And we can unite these big players, right? Unite the builders of the digital age that all started coming through. And, Maricel Cerruti. Okay. So I called Maricel first. She was my first board member, right? Because she's awesome and a super connector around the industry. And so then we started creating, the structure of it and what we're going after. And so that was education, diversity, inclusion, and sustainability.
So those were the objectives. That's
the
purpose.
First 3 things we went after.
And it was sustainability, diversity, and what?
And education.
Okay, education, because that's the part we were talking about a lot yesterday on that.
Yep.
And that's where I started probably leaning in more because you started talking about the existential threat, and I was like,
people,
I can help there.
Talent.
I can't help with the technology, but I can help with the other piece, like the labor side, So
Well, it's
keep
just
going.
getting access to those people.
Mhm.
So if you think about those things, the other one that was important is we are going to unite the abilities of the digital age by enabling them to connect, grow, and give back. 3 additional really important things. And this is resonating with all the different people. So connect. We should be able to have these conversations anywhere and that we're doing it. Grow. We're going to learn no matter what. Because you may think you're mentoring somebody, but they're actually mentoring you. You're getting different things back and forth in it. And then giving back, that's when we created the scholarship fund. And that's when we said, let's go figure out how we can go recruit new talent coming in. So this is 2016.
But on the educate side, didn't you guys have like some focus campaigns to try to help some schools develop a class
Curriculum,
or something?
and
Yeah,
all that.
something to where
And I would say that we're making progress, but we're not making enough progress.
I would agree, because it seems like right now we're giving people jobs that don't even exist yet sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And
Which is okay.
it's totally okay, but it also means that there's no institutional platform, a homogenous environment like a fishbowl that everyone sits into. And
Yeah.
if I wanted to go be an engineer, there's a degree for that. If I want to be in finance
Yep, exactly.
But there's nothing that really taught you and prepared you for data centers other than something that you've done in the past that has a collateral overlay to something that you're doing now.
Well, think about the beginning of our conversation. I didn't choose this industry at all. I happened into it because Sun Microsystems came to a campus and interviewed me and said, I think he could help. And then I went to Silicon Valley, and I learned it all that way. So what we're saying is that there is no path for us to be able to right now show all of these different university colleges, right, community colleges, those students, that there's this opportunity.
Well, I'm surprised that DeVry is not trying to create campaigns and saying, if you want to be a thought leader in a specific vertical, you don't have to go to Harvard. You could go to a place like this. And quite frankly, like I've read stuff where Elon was talking, it's like, I don't even understand why in technology you would study technology in college, knowing that by the time you started and the time you finished, it would all be obsolete.
It's obsolete, yeah.
Yeah, you should do it. Like we have I had a kid that came here this morning to drop off something to me, and he is our first data center apprentice, and we're like, what are we going to do with this? And I'm like, I don't know, but one day he'll learn enough to be a journeyman, and one day, but it should be like the trades, right? It should be easier. The barriers to get in and to get educated should be easier.
So what we're doing with the education program is that, and Dennis Cronin is the chair of our education committee.
Smart guy.
And he's been around for a long time and done a lot of things, and so it's great to give that wisdom back in, but help lead in this. But we've got 23 different programs across 13 different universities, colleges.
That's amazing.
And all the way down to a certification program. So
I had no idea.
So SMU
has
a master's degree student process.
Heard about that one. But that's the only one I really know about.
Chris Crosby, Eddie Shooter, like they helped formulate that entire thing.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
It's a Texas-based, anyway, that, and then there's Anglia Ruskin University in the UK, and that's tied to CNET training, which goes to certifications and all that. But this is a master's degree, in data centers. So there are a few programs for it. But when I was in DCD in London in 2018, we'd raised $50,000 or something for our scholarship fund. Like, great, okay, cool. And I said, that's not enough. So in front of that, right, got Joe Cava and everybody else in the room, I said, I think we need to be thinking like the hyperscalers. So we're going to do a 20x goal. We're going to grow by 20x. We're putting out the $1 million challenge. We're going to raise $1 million for us to go back and do the scholarship fund into the fund.
Tell me about the scholarship fund. So how does that work? How does someone that doesn't even know about the industry benefit from that? Or is it really designed for those that go get an MBA from SMU?
It is for everyone. And so we have everything from, you could take a 1-week certification course to a master's degree.
Can they use it to go get a CDCP or something like that? Like, okay, but how do they apply?
We continue. So you go to imasons.org/scholarships, and in that you can apply right into it. And the problem is, right now I think we're at $864,000 raised. We went from 50,000 to 864, and we have our iMasons Awards show in London. Right? I'm going to challenge everybody in that room to hit $1 million this year
before they leave.
Yep.
That's pretty amazing. And you have
So we've got Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta. Right, Yonder, Pure, Stack Infrastructure, like all these companies that are involved in the actual event, and then Schneider Electric is the kind of patron that's driving it all, right? That's helping to make this awards show happen. But we're going after that. Like it's achievable. Absolutely.
How do Can any company, if they work for somebody within the ecosystem, if they're not an enterprise or an operator,
Yeah.
do they have the ability to apply for
They do.
a scholarship?
Any it's open to anyone, except for when companies are using it to offset their own expenses.
No, that's totally fair. But
Yeah, but we've awarded scholarships to different people that would not have the ability to do that at their company. Like, great, then we'll pay for it. Because you're trying to go back and enhance yourself. And if the company can benefit from it, excellent. They don't have a program today, no problem. So we've done that all over the place. And a lot of CNET certifications. And what's neat about the stats right now, we've given out 40 scholarships, right, so far this year. And 45% of them have been awarded to students in Africa.
oh wow,
So think about the reach.
dude, I have someone that would be perfect for this. But yeah.
Yeah? Awesome. Bring them in.
So I was telling, I did a podcast earlier with Brittany, and I was telling her, do you know who my community is that I'm trying to serve with the businesses that we have?
You asked her or you're asking
No,
me?
do you know the communities that are most important to me?
Veterans.
100%.
Yes.
So we put all the wood we can behind
Special
those arrows.
Forces.
I know,
go.
your data center special forces.
This is my new favorite shirt, by the way. I got it.
I'll send you a box of them, man. Hand them out. I'll tell you this. The shirt actually is Giddy Up gear, which is Laramie at Yonder. But
Yeah?
when Laramie was at Cyrus One, right, Laramie and a couple of the other guys, I feel like we grew up in the industry together. You have your peer group, and these are our peer group. I kind of look at you guys as the juniors and seniors, and we're like the freshman, sophomore class, kind of, right? So we'll one day hopefully rise to where you guys are, where we're having a major contribution. You guys move the needle in the industry, right? So it's a small pocket of people that kind of determine the steering of what we're going to do as a collective. There's outliers everywhere, but the average is what you're trying to control because you want to move the entire industry up, right? And there's people that have to champion that. That's a selfless thing, and it's a thankless thing. It probably feels like sometimes is you're trying to create an environment that everyone can benefit from, and some don't even understand how to use it sometimes.
Okay. Let me give a parallel to you. All right. The thankless part of it, in the end, I know what we're doing is making a difference. And if people don't understand it, it's okay.
But do you get
all right.
this all the time? I mean, people don't. I know what you're doing. It's amazing, but people don't get it sometimes. I didn't understand the extent of your scholarships.
So think about this. What you're doing for veterans right now is insanely impactful. I was at your event yesterday listening to Jake talk.
Jake Schick, he's the founder or CEO of One Tribe.
One Tribe, right. Which was 22 killed before, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I love the fact when he goes, I put that out because it needs to punch you in the face. Everyone needs to realize the reality of what these people are giving up for us to have our freedom. Just when you talk about the United States and the armed forces. And so I'm getting goosebumps right now. So that I listened to his story about the impact of him being in Iraq and what happened, and he lost a leg. Like, he almost died. Like, you think of it. And then what is he doing? He's selflessly going out and helping.
Yeah.
And it's the goal, right? What you keep saying is, how many people?
22. Now it's at 20. But
people kill, right? Or suicide.
So we had, let's just say we've had 8,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen die since September 11th in theaters of conflict and combat.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that doesn't include, all those that are on active duty that, maybe die in injuries of training or.
Sure.
But since then, we have, hundreds of thousands of veterans that killed themselves since the war coming back. And it's because they don't know how to acclimate back. It's really hard when you're in a role in which you're doing something that we all feel is significant and you have an amazing purpose.
Yep.
And then you leave and you're not doing something significant again. And without that purpose, that's where anxiety, depression, and PTSD and things of that nature, which ultimately lead to suicide. And we know that if we could provide a new purpose, we could reduce that suicide rate.
And that to me is where, again, purpose. So I watch you and what you're doing, and you're not looking for the public accolades. I'm not either.
That's what I'm saying.
It seriously is that when I die,
that's the legacy.
Did I actually contribute? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable that I'm doing things right now that I know are helping people. That's 100%. Enough.
I want to help you help more people, which is, okay, we all have a community. You have a community. Every company has something, right?
Yep.
But what do we do when we have an outlier to that community? An example for me is recently, in the last few weeks, I was introduced to this gentleman who fled Liberia in a civil war. And, life and death situations. Like the way that he views the world is way different than the way that we do.
Right.
And I didn't understand that. I mean, I've heard that, but I didn't understand it until I'm face to face. Like I do these podcasts and people are like, hey, can I do one? I'll remote in. I'm like, no. We have to be face to face. The energy dynamic is completely different.
Yep, totally.
And I was in front of this guy and I was aware of this message, but I didn't understand or appreciate it or empathize for it until I talked to him. And I was like, I went back to my leadership team. I go, guys, I know that we are dedicated. Our purpose and mission is to help veterans. He's not a veteran, but we're going to figure out a way. I can't help everybody from Liberia, but if we could help this one and figure out how we can get him trained up, I said, I'll hire you as a data center apprentice. No idea what we're going to do with you. We're going to introduce you to everything. And at the end of 6 months, my goal is to go get you a job in this industry where you can thrive. And I said, when you're done, we'll put you on a podcast and try to broadcast it to where you could reach all the Liberian people and be like, this is how we sweep you into the industry.
Yeah.
That solves your existential threat. It's not because it's not my purpose, but if I could help when I can. But now the way that I can help you connect more is I don't want to dilute my purpose, but I'd like to see that community still get their help. You're creating an incubator that we could tether from.
So 100%. So think of like we've got an umbrella here, which is digital infrastructure and the education program. There are verticals in that. Veterans, right? We have the iMasons Veterans Group, right? That member resource group. What are we doing? Creating a place where they can come back together. That community can actually have conversations. But you think about your side. We need more applicants. Plain and simple. Anyone. So yesterday we met all the different active folks, right?
Active military, yeah.
The military folks. So on the Navy side and all that, that guy that...
We had the captain of the USS New Jersey, which is the most elite fast attack on the fleet right now.
Yeah.
One of the nicest guys, by the way, right? Very unassuming. But make no mistake, that guy, if you're leading the Navy's top submarine, you got your shit on lockdown, right? And he's obviously a very smart guy. You can tell in talking to him. But we had all kinds of active duty guys. I had Cobbs that were active duty Master Chiefs that were here. And you're going to just see us continue to pump more in and expose them.
That's what I mean, because here's a group of people that came in, and they are going to be leaving the military. Okay. Hello, those are the kind of people that have the leadership skills and the experience that can handle any kind of situation that pops up. You want those people in data center and digital infrastructure, right? Operations and support and those things. So I think that the point being that can we get more and more people exposed that way? And then back to your other side of, from homeless veterans to anyone from the veteran standpoint should have an opportunity. We want more applicants. So the more you can recruit, just point at imasons.org/scholarships. That is going to now fill the pipeline, because I want to get to the point where we have more applicants than money.
So that's where we could help. And I want that too, because
fill the pipeline.
Well, listen, you've created an infrastructure that is designed to help support introducing more people to the space.
All types.
But that's what I'm saying.
All verticals.
I don't know if everybody understood that, or at what point is it entry level? I mean, if you're hiring, it's zero, starting from zero.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, imagine. Okay, I'm going to give you a fun story. Let me show you a picture. Yesterday, I was leaving the conference, right, going back to my hotel, and I'm walking, and this young guy, stops me on the street.
Of course.
And he's got children.org. He's got a pink thing on like that, right? He goes, hey, how you doing? I'm like, okay, he's going to ask me for money. But I was intrigued. I said, so children.org, what is this? He's British. He came in from London, right? So I ended up donating.
Yeah, of course.
You
want to help.
I'm a sucker for all this stuff. So, but then I said, why do you do this? I was curious, because I'm literally reading him and how he's interacting with people. And I'm thinking, that guy would be really good in our industry. He would, right? And so I'm just asking. So I ended up recruiting right there.
Nice.
And so, and this is the young man, right?
Oh, awesome.
And so he just genuine, you know what I mean? Like just a nice guy. Yeah. But man, he's a mover. Like he was constantly bringing it back around. He was sitting sales. I'm like, you know what a data center is? Like, no. And so I explained it to him. He's like, wait, so there's jobs in there?
Oh, for sure.
Dude, there is so much opportunity. And we need people like you. Creative, motivated, right? Go-getters. So I said, go to imasons.org/scholarships. Take a look. And it's dean@imasons.org. Reach out.
All right. That's good to know. So that's easy for people that want to, or if you're listening or watching, I'll tell you, like, there are there are tons of those one-offs. I have a one-off. Everybody has a one-off from whatever community, right? And I think the reason, let me help add to that collective and bring more visibility, and let's all work together to pull a bigger orbit around it. I remember when Jason O'Roy and those guys were starting Salute, and he's like, I was in Chicago when he was at a napkin explaining these things, and I was like, wait a second, time out. Can I be your first client? Day laborers, homeless veterans. I'm like, done. I called every data center operator I knew that ran their construction teams. I called every GC I knew and said, if you're using day laborers, hire these guys because they're going to bring in homeless veterans, train them, and give them a new purpose.
Amazing.
No one gave a shit how much we were paying for those guys. We just knew that I would suffer an inconvenience or pay a premium to change those lives because it's a rounding error in comparison to the shit that we were doing, right? Yeah. But it doesn't take much is what I'm trying to say. And I think, like, look, I've known you, but I didn't even think about this Liberian kid who I'm like, I don't know, but it's in my heart where we're going to help this guy. I'm telling my leadership team, I'm like, anybody got a problem with this? We're going to absorb whatever his cost is. We're going to train him, and then we're going to help him get a job. And then we're going to use him as the example on how other people in his situation can do the same. It's not a veteran. We're not committed to any other communities more though than we are this one, but if we could help this one, but now I could kind of work with him together with your team,
totally,
and be like, hey, listen, and then use that as a narrative, and then we could go explain that to people and be like, this is a transparent and repeatable model for everybody. It's not giving them jobs; it's changing their lives.
Absolutely, and so tie that back to this bigger picture of so Yonder was that your thing as well. They're a sponsor, and they've been so supportive on so many things from the education side in every one of our awards and our events and that type of thing. I want to get to the point where I have too many applicants.
Ooh,
I want that. Right now, we can grant everybody, and I want to do that too. But I want to get to the point where we don't have enough money.
I love that
because I know what's going to happen. The companies are going to go, here's money, let's go. You have more talent because they're all fighting for the same thing. I need more resources. So the more people we can bring back in. So inside of the education committee, one thing that Jeff Omelchuk and Dennis Cronin put together was the Capstone Project. And so this is with historically black colleges and universities and Hispanic institutions, serving institutions. We found Hampton University. It's one of the 13 HBCUs inside of this industry engineering consortium, right? And so we set up a capstone project, and Bill Clayman is one of the actual
stud. Yeah,
he's awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
So he's a mentor, and he recruited other iMasons members together, and they meet with students once a week. And what do? They sit down with those students and basically say, "What do you want to know?" Because the capstone project is a year long. If they sign up for it, we grant them all scholarships.
That's amazing,
right? Then they have to go from zero and design and implement a data center in the capstone project. At their final project is, here's everything learned, here's the design, here's the innovation, and they present it. Let me give you an example from last year. We had the final presentations from the teams in it. On that call was Randy Brockman, CEO of EdgeConnects, Eric Wilcox, who runs all data centers for Amazon, right? Joe Cava. Like, it was incredible. You have the most senior executives sitting there listening to these students. And what was amazing is they're all fighting for the people on the call. They're like, oh, Jai is done. That Bill talks about Jai, right? Oh, no, Randy already got her. He hired her, right? And that's the thing. Now Bill's like, okay, here's this new cohort. I've already started talking to that person. I see their potential. I see that. But the point is that we had one school, and now we want to get to all 13 of them. But that's like one program. Well, how many other programs are out there? Right? Because we grant a whole bunch of scholarships for it.
So when you started, how long ago did you start it, by the way?
2016.
Okay.
April 2nd.
And how big is it again now?
Oof. There's tens of thousands of people. I think it's hundreds of thousands of people that are available in our industry or in our industry. But we've got, I think, 3,000 active members. And there's 7,000 people on LinkedIn within our activities.
Worldwide. I mean, it's
global. It's I think we're in 130 countries. Something like that.
So what do you have a summit once a year? I know you had a big virtual one just recently.
We have quite a few, actually.
What's the big one? What's like the
we have the Global Member Summit that we hold in California usually. But with the pandemic, we started doing Global Member Summits online. And that was actually great because now we had more participation.
Oh,
because everybody could actually participate. And it was a production. It was a lot of work to put it back together, but it worked out really well. But there's nothing like face-to-face. So we have, I think, 14 local chapters across the world. So in India, in Australia, of course, the UK, Paris, Spain, 3 or 4 across the United States. But those local chapters meet. And then we also have the advisory council. And that advisory council is made up of appointees and our foundation partners. They have a seat. And those 47 people on the advisory council come together at least 3 times a year. And the one this year that was probably the most special was the one we held at Christian Bellatti's house called Shea Bellotti.
And what was that one all about?
This was tying to the sustainability side.
So sustainability, diversity, and education are the top 3 pillars you said, right?
Right. So the initiation, diversity, inclusion, right? Education, sustainability, and then we also now have technology.
Oh, okay.
We started that last year.
And the one that you were doing at Bellatti's was focused more on
100% on sustainability.
Okay.
And the reason is that back in 2020, when we had our first global members meeting online with the pandemic, we did it on Earth Day. And we had come together, again, the senior people inside of the advisory council, and we did all this brainstorming on what could we do from a sustainability standpoint. So we launched the sustainability vision for the industry. Every click improves the future. There's a lot to that. Okay, so every time you're using technology, you're doing something online. How is it improving the future? You can define that many different ways. Because we believe that digital infrastructure should positively impact the community and, right, the economy without damaging the planet. That is the tagline under this. So that started in 2020. And lots of efforts, and people put out their, ESG goals and the sustainability becoming carbon neutral and then getting to net zero and things. And that's great. But Christian went on sabbatical, and he had a bit of an epiphany and realized that we're not moving fast enough. And all of us had that thing that if you think about the weather, the extreme weather, the things that are going on right now, it's because those temperatures have risen and it's affecting the ecosystem. And then you think about all the greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera, that are contributing to all of this. And then you think of, well, why is that happening? It's such a daunting problem for everyone. And so everybody's been talking about it, and we thought, can we just come together and figure out one thing that we can do as an industry? Just one. That's a lot more complicated than you think, like getting something simple of a single thing. So I called Christian in January, and I said, Christian, I'd like to have an advisory council session at your house in Seattle.
And he's like, I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
He goes,
coming in
huh?
crazy.
What? So remember, he had an epiphany, and he's having a lot of life-changing events for him and the way he's thinking about it. And a lot of this is led up. I won't share the details of it, but just things about his kids and the future and that. And I think it's just resonating right now that we're getting older. And what does the future look like for our own kids? We're gone. Okay. If like coastlines are gone, and like it just suddenly it
became more urgent.
Thing.
It seemed like.
Yeah, and we've been having this conversation for a while, and then I remember something that Christian told me about his dad. So his dad was on the engineering teams. I forgot which company, but I think he created CMOS chips, invented CMOS chips. And Christian said he was watching a documentary, and he saw his dad on the documentary.
Wow.
And then he said, and I knew all those people in the documentary. Why? Because those people came to my house. My dad had those people over, those physicists and everything else, and they were doing stuff at the house. He goes, I recognize them. And he goes, what's my community? Like, what is that? So tie it back to iMasons, right? And I always remembered that because his dad had Alzheimer's, and he had a memoir that they put together, and it's just incredible. Like, it's that thick, right? Of what his dad was done and the impact and influence on his life. And I think it profoundly impacted Christian in about like him. He's done so much stuff in the industry, right? And driven technology and expansion and portfolios and all this. But then it was more of like, okay, and so what? What about the real things that matter? And he and I both have this kind of perspective of, great, we've done all these things. Everyone's going to forget it. It doesn't matter. Great. I've driven $10 billion of infrastructure projects across 3 continents. Who gives a shit? Think about it, right? So yeah, we had influence in it, but what about now? What's the bigger picture of it all? And so, anyways, I thought of that, and I said, Christian, I remembered your dad, and I thought, why don't we just bring together those people into your house?
It's pretty cool.
And so he's like, yes,
For
let's
real.
do it. And he had his new house and stuff, and so he was figuring out furniture. He didn't have it all yet. I'm like, great, okay, we'll fill it up. iMasons will take care of it. We're good. So we brought 40 people together. And again, our objective was one thing that we could do to battle climate change as an industry, one thing. And we spent 6 hours at his house.
How many people?
40.
And this is on Earth Day?
The Earth Day was 2020. This is
that
on
was the
February
virtual.
22nd this year, right? So 2/22/2022. Lots of twos. There's some astrological something with it, I'm sure. But anyways, it was an amazing moment.
What did you arrive at? What did you guys discover?
That's where the iMasons Climate Accord was born.
Oh, let's talk about that, because listen, the stuff that takes place, with all you big fat brains behind the green curtain of Oz, like, we don't get that stuff sometimes, right? So I'm like, but I will tell you this. This is my new mag. Like, this is my favorite rag right here. So if anybody's watching and you don't have the Interglobix,
Yep, you need to get Interglobix.
worth every penny. If you're a professional in this industry, shame on you if you're not taking time to become a better data center professional.
Shame
right?
them out. Yeah.
Shame on you, man. You should not just be writing out. You got to be watching this. These are the people that make a difference in this space.
There is gold in this magazine. It's meaty, and that's.
You asked me if I had a copy of this one today, and I was like, I have the last 4 copies in my car. You think I'm joking? Because
Right
I'm
on.
always referring back to something. I remember that conversation once.
Yeah,
You think I'm
yeah.
joking? They're underneath the seats in my car. So let's go to this page.
Okay.
This is the latest version of Interglobix magazine, issue 9.
Edition 9. Yep.
So, and if you haven't read Interglobix magazine, just a phenomenal publication.
And Jasmine Beatty is the founder of this, and what she's put together to amass these, right? It's data center, connectivity, luxury, and lifestyle.
She functions in a way in which she's dedicated to the cause, because like she seems more committed to seeing this information get out.
Yep.
Right. And trying to figure out how to maximize. I mean, I remember how much I paid for my subscription, but I'm like, are we kidding? Why are we even having this conversation? But talk to me about this article, because I haven't read it. I'm on page 110.
Which is great. No, that's perfect. So let me give you the synopsis of it. So inside of this magazine, I wrote a piece with Jasmine. She interviewed me about the Climate Accord. So iMasons Climate Accord. And so the title of this thing is called The Impact of Climate Change. But it goes through the history of what it is we did, why we did it, and what we're doing. So the Climate Accord itself, Shea Bellotti, right? Christian hates the fact that we call it that, but I love it because we're at his little house, right? We came together again to find one thing we could do. And what that was is we were all united on carbon reduction. So think about Meta, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon, all of the different provider companies, the colo companies, they're all putting out these ESG goals. But the one thing that was common is that everyone is trying to get to carbon neutrality first as the step towards net zero. Okay. Can we shorten the timeline to get to carbon neutrality? Great. So that means that we're not emitting more carbon than we're actually stopping. Pretty simple.
What's the price of getting there? And I say price because it comes down to it's a function of economics still, right? So like you're putting pressure on. It's easier, I think, if you're an enterprise. I'm talking to you because this isn't my. I need you to tell me where I'm wrong. I need you to tell me what I'm missing.
And this is what I love.
So I see enterprise on-prem providers, hyperscalers, large enterprise, the G1K, they can do these things because I'm not saying it's a cost center to them, their data center, but if you're a data center wholesale operator, I mean, the primary line of business you use to generate revenue is this. And right now, there was a narrative over the last few years where people were like, I could get to 5 million a mega. There was all these crazy things. And what you're talking about here and being responsible, that doesn't mean cheapest all the time. So how are you shifting the optics and how people were like,
right.
That's a big workup. I don't understand
it. But if you back up and look at it, the impact of climate change specifically is what is the cost of not being able to live on this planet
versus the cost of getting it right.
And so this is something Christian talks about quite a bit. That was the epiphany, is you go back and say it doesn't really matter in the end if we can't have a habitable planet. And then, but again, it's so daunting. But let me go back to Greg Papadopoulos, the chief sustainability officer from Sun. He said it is about balancing ecology and economics. You just said the economics need to win. 100%. We're businesses. We have to make a revenue, right, for the shareholders and those things. but not at the cost of the ecology aspect. And the big difference today is that back in 2009, there was no money behind it. Okay, and when I say that, the investment community was saying that's a nice to have.
Yeah.
There was nothing in RFPs, whatever else. So there were leading companies that were doing a lot of things on efficiency and sustainability and that kind of thing, like Sun Microsystems. Microsoft was doing it, Google was doing it. So a lot of people that were doing that, but it was a small number. Today, now if you think of BlackRock, $6 trillion of assets under management.
The largest hedge fund in the world, aren't they?
It's insane.
Yeah.
They're only doing ESG-based investments. They've shifted their money. So that's a big difference, okay? That means that they're going to be funding programs to go find a sustainable way in which things are done. That will drive all the innovators to go think about it instead of not a nice to have, but an actual priority. Secondly, you think of the biggest companies in the world, Amazon's, Google, Microsoft, right? eBay, Apple, all of these companies have made commitments publicly as publicly traded companies that they will achieve carbon neutrality and net zero by certain dates. And I'm telling you right now, in the conversations and back channel conversations, none of them have an answer to it yet. They do not know how we're going to get there yet, but they've made the commitments, okay? And the way they did this, and Microsoft is one I think is really, really interesting in their approach. They said, we don't know publicly, but we need your help. So we set up a $1 billion innovation fund. There is a bucket of money available for people that come back with solutions to help them solve that problem. So money is behind it, right?
So is the money into those solutions though? I don't understand how that would help. I understand the premise, but can I ask another stupid question?
Yeah. And by the way, challenge. This is good. This is the discussion we should be having.
Well, the biggest challenge that you always have, regardless of the industry or regarding of the company or the collective, the Mason, is you have these people up here that are the visionaries that are creating all these amazing ideas that allow us to unleash emerging technologies in a better way. But the people that they sometimes hire at those companies, FAMGA, they have sophisticated procurement teams that are armed to the teeth, and the data center is a commodity, right? And they're like,
you're so right.
So how do I create that? So now you're taking this pressure to where we're going to be carbon neutral by X, whether we're building ourselves or our partners are going to be, we're going to impose that on our partners. And now you, at the same time, are saying, look, we're going to ask you, you're going to have to help us be carbon neutral, which is going to have a burden of cost of some kind. But at the same time, they have these sophisticated procurement teams that are maybe a little bit disconnected from this group to this point, and they don't have access to that $1 billion fund that would be allowed to offset the difference or delta to allow them to still pay $2 more per kW than what they would do. But that's where it'd have to take place. There has to be that agreement. I mean, if the dudes that are the top guys at those companies, like the Christians, I doubt that Christians evaluating every lease agreement that they do with all their partners, right? So, but those guys are tasked to get the lowest price possible. And that, if these guys are like, look, they're trying, I think the operators are struggling to try to figure out how do I solve for that, because they want to as well. They're just as committed, but they also have shareholders too, whether they're public or private, right? So like, how do I do this with like that guy from Sun? You have to have this without compromising that.
Yeah. Ecology and economics can balance. They should balance. They have to balance.
But green is green to some of these people. Green is money. So how do you tie that together? How does that make sense?
So let me make these dots connect. So again, the money coming in, there's trillions of dollars of investment that's going to go in to now drive behavior change and innovation and radical transformation in the way things are done. It is, right? Because again, people are paying to go back and say, solve that problem in a different way. Secondly, these big companies are coming and making the commitments. Third is programs like what we're putting together are giving the tangible way in which it can be achieved. And let me explain what that means. We are doing carbon labels. So, you pull out food.
Yeah.
This thing's got a nutrition label on it. Well, this one doesn't, but anything that's got that, you have a nutrition label. That nutrition label shows what's inside of that actual piece, that food product. Why? So you can make informed decisions. Oh, that one's got too much sodium. This one's got fat, saturated fat, something. Okay, well, I'll make a decision. Yeah, I'm going to pick this one.
I like that.
So we're putting carbon label to show the embodied carbon history in products. So take a a cat generator, there's a carbon label on it. It'll show from the beginning of that everything from mining the minerals to smelting the steel to like all that things to be able to say this much embodied carbon in that thing.
Interesting.
Right? Number one. Then we're going to put that on data centers. So think about it, the materials in data centers, concrete, steel, copper, plastics, anything else inside of it, they also have a carbon footprint. They also change because I'm going to retrofit, I'm going to expand, I'm going to decom, right? What is the lifetime carbon accounting of it? Well, we're going to say that that data center is a sum of materials and the products inside of it. And we'll be able to get an embodied carbon footprint of that site. In the previous edition of this magazine, I did a thing about defining the digital infrastructure industry. And so what we have right now is there are 7 million data center locations, independent, unique locations. There's 105 gigawatts of capacity built globally.
Wow.
Okay. We consume 594 terawatt hours of energy in our industry. That represents 2.4% of the global energy draw. Why is that important? It's 2.4%. Okay. It's not even double digits. It's growing rapidly, right? And PUE,
just wait till AI and AR and VR are more prevalent.
Which is happening, and the distributed nature of it. Web3, we're talking about like metaverse.
5G.
Like those things they're going to blow up the edge.
Oh yeah.
Right? So there's tons and tons of this. But if you think about it, that's the baseline. Okay, that's digital infrastructure. We have to have a starting point. Well, now imagine 7 million locations. That means each of them have a unique address. Everything from the street corner controlling the lights, right? There's an address for this digital infrastructure deployment. And all the way back to the 1 gigawatt like campuses. So if you think of those, every one of those buildings has a unique profile. It has its embodied carbon when it comes down to the materials and how it was built, when it was built, right? What it was built with, and the products inside of it, right? Everything from the air conditioning, the mechanical, electrical, to the servers, to the switches, to the storage devices, all of those products inside. Imagine the carbon labels on them, and then the sum of the building carbon label that is embodied carbon in the materials and the products. Now we know what that is. Then you take the source energy for that location. How much coal, how much renewable, how much nuclear. Yeah. Now you have the carbon intensity of the energy that is consumed inside of it. So you've got the embodied and the actual emitted based on energy. Once we have that, every one of those profiles of those data centers, you're going to start to be able to change what's going on. If you can measure it, you can change it. Right now, we don't have a way to go back and measure carbon for these locations. So, hence that definition was important. There are 7 million locations. Every one of those locations should have a unique profile. That way we can measure carbon, right? We can have global carbon accounting for digital infrastructure. All 2.4% of the energy draw we should be able to see. And let me give you a little bit more of like a...
But what would happen? What was the benefit? Like I see what you're doing because it sounds like it's similar to what you did at Sun, right? Where you were aggregating shit tons of data
to make it easily digestible.
And you had analysts that were like, this is what it takes for every application, this many pages or whatever equates to this in power. That made sense. You controlled that data, and that was there to benefit you and your efficiency and how to optimize in advance. When you're controlling a collective that has free will, what would encourage these 7,000 or 7 million, however many data centers there are to adopt that? And of that, once that, I mean, that's a momentous, I think it's awesome, but it's a ton of work, and work costs time and money. So, but when you get done with that, of the 2.4, what will you gain? Will you bring it down to like 2%? I mean, what's
our energy consumption is going to go up, but the carbon intensity of all of digital infrastructure will go down.
Okay.
And why will it go down? Because remember, the edge and all the other things that are happening, we're going to draw more power. We will, globally, because the world consumes it. We just need to do it sustainably. So that means that we should have renewable energy that's offsetting all these different places. And like Google does that, right? Hour by hour, renewable energy matching on everything. Great. So they've already achieved that in the power. But they have a lot of data centers. They're some of the biggest portfolios in the world. So what's the embodied carbon for them? Now, here's where the rubber hits the road. We had this session. If you look at the magazine, this is the picture of the 40 people that came together. And we came up with a climate accord, right? So if you look at it, there's Eric Wilcox from AWS, there's Christian Blatty from Microsoft, there's Joe Kava from Google, there's Chris Malone from Meta, there's Kurt Belisar from Apple, Cola providers, Schneider Electric, Vertiv, right? Rahi Systems, like all of these people in here
Yeah.
care, and they all have their own goals. And it's on both sides of the coin again. It's the buyers and the suppliers. And I'm saying product and service providers, et cetera. So the difference here is that everybody's working together because they have their own goals they need to achieve, and they're dependent upon each other. The hyperscalers cannot achieve this without the Cola players and the other product providers doing something to assist. So the way to do that is a simple mechanism. We put that carbon label on these things. You have access to that data. They call it an EPD, Environmental Product Disclosure. That thing shows the embodied carbon of that thing based on an ISO standard. So this exists. We need a mechanism to be able to get access to that data. So that data now will be exposing where we are, and it will drive people to think about how to solve that problem. Carbon capture, right? Low carbon concrete. Removing steel and actually putting flex in the concrete instead of doing steel bar type construction. Like, there's so many different ways to go back and say continually lower it. But here's the thing that I found really cool. Christian went to the procurement teams, to go back to your point, and he said, all right, what's it going to take for us to put a requirement in the RFPs to have carbon labels? That ripple effect is massive.
I agree.
Now you look at the procurement teams. What are they measured on? Right now, so give me the lowest price, make sure I get the best terms.
So that's what I'm saying.
Right?
Unless.
Yep. So now you suddenly have a ripple effect that's going to hit where the rubber hits the road. The people that are there are tied back to this larger sustainability piece because I don't know about you. If you've seen the latest RFPs in the last 2 years, sustainability is no longer just that checkbox at the bottom. It literally is near the top.
I would say it's part of the reason why we've seen there was I mean, it's cyclical. The industry is when price per kW is, and it looks like there's a combination of factors, maybe available product or inventory available online because
especially right now. You heard JLL yesterday.
That was bananas, right? But that's why I always
Sold
start
out.
every conference. I always start with them first because that's the trend of purchasing. From 20% of the industry represents 80% of the market spend. So you kind of have to focus on those groups because they're the ones that initiate the tipping point, right?
So don't let me forget, because I want to tie this back into what I do at my software company.
Yeah,
because it is fully related to this, but. To really think about the demand and the challenge we've got right now, the growth is through the roof, right? The capacity is sold. Mm-hmm. Okay. Every time we build a data center, we need to influence the design decisions, the procurement decisions, the operational decisions, the efficiency decisions, right? The utilization decision. We need to be pushing those because the data is going to be given to engineers, and we let those engineers solve that problem, like we talked about earlier. If you can truly give them that thing to sink their teeth into, they're going to amaze you. Right now, they're fully limited by procurement, cost, and other things.
Everything was driving it to be cheaper. Now you're driving it to be better.
Right. But what's interesting is a lot of these ideas that come back are more cost effective. Think about the Bloom fuel cells. In the end of it, we challenged how we were going to go put that together. The size of the building was cut in half. We removed $10 million worth of electrical infrastructure because we were doing fuel cells.
But it wasn't, in my opinion, Dean, it wasn't the design that changed. It was the collaboration method that you had. Because if you didn't have the ability to engage with those other people on the other side of the ball in a
then you're bound. You're limited. Totally.
Then you're in opposition almost, it seems.
Yep. And so this is where, again, I think
means and methods make a difference. If those companies were to, and they probably do in some means, but explain what they're going to be doing in the future over the course of a longer period of time, and it's impossible for them to do that. And I know that's secret IP. You know, they don't want to tell everyone what their growth models and stuff look like, but I think that's how you get the buy-in of not just these 40, but the next 400 or 4,000.
Totally.
Right.
Well, if you go further into this one, right, what happens is that we had this initial thing. Then we launched this at Broad Group, right, in Monaco. So Christian and I went on stage, started talking about it, and we had 73 companies signed up in less than 6 weeks.
No kidding. Is there a list of them, some in here?
Yep. By the way, 6 weeks after that, we were at 168.
That's fantastic.
So if you go to the middle of this, what you're going to see is...
How long until they adopt it?
They're already in.
Okay, so they're committed to it now.
They're pledging to go back and reduce carbon and apply carbon labels to this. So if you think about it, this is the working session we had at Christian's house and the outcomes from it. And then we started going into evangelizing this and driving it with the different companies. So if you look at the 6 trillion number keeps coming up, the market cap of the companies that are publicly traded inside of this, right, this climate accord, it's over $6 trillion. That's the value of these companies.
When you did this, did you have a goal of how many you would get committed? Were there a certain like top 10 that you were targeting? Is there
Our number one thing was we
anybody
get the
remember?
hyperscalers in because in the end of it, the buyers drive the decisions. And the biggest purchasers in the world are hyperscalers. As you said, 80% of the market is driven by 20% or whatever that works out to be, or 5.
Yeah, 5%.
Five people.
5% control. 5 companies
Yeah.
or 5% control 80% of the market spend.
But what also I think people miss is that when you flip this over, they are leveraging colos more than ever now. So the largest buyers in the world of mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and construction are the colo providers, not the hyperscalers. Why? Because they're building for the hyperscalers, as well as the enterprises, as well as the other retail and those things. But in the end, those are 2 massive buying pools.
Yeah.
Then you've got the suppliers. And I'm talking about the Schneider, Vertivs, Eatons, Dells, HPEs, etc. Like all of those companies, they also have huge EPD goals, right, or environmental goals, the ESG side, and so they want to do this. It's no longer you're forcing me to do it. So we brought people together.
This is awesome.
When we were in Spain, Miami, then Monaco. We were collaborating with the teams and everything, and then we announced this. But by that time, then we had, if you go to the next couple pages.
How long did it take to get from the concept to this?
February 22nd. April 25th.
But actually, it started before February because it was a concept that started last
2020
year.
was the strategy, right? The vision, what we wanted to get to. And then the urgency came back because we're not moving fast enough. So then we said, let's figure that out. But it was 6 weeks from that. And now you can see this is 161 companies, right? We're at 168 right now. But I mean, these are huge companies.
Yeah, they are.
Everything from JLL, the CBRE,
AWS.
right, to Huawei, back into Cisco, and then 65 co-location companies.
But there's some huge companies. This is the 90% of the market spend right here.
Oh yeah,
160.
easy.
Yeah.
And that's we were surprised with, how fast, but it was because it resonated with their strategy, their commitments, their goals, and serving their customers, right, on all sides. Doesn't matter. Cloud has got to go back and represent, to their customers. Joe Kopic talks about this all the time. Okay, they want to know what their carbon footprint is by using GCP. Same thing with Amazon. Same thing with, so it all ties together that ESG from the investment side, trillions and trillions of dollars are saying this is priority, to the actual implementation tied to the supplier side. So the ecosystem is coming together. Yeah. Now, what we have to do as an industry is truly understand we're impatient. We have to be urgent about it. If we don't do something, that's why this 6 weeks we were moving. The first ones to sign up were the hyperscalers. I didn't expect to get them that fast, but they were in. They were all in. They were ready to go. And then everybody else behind it going, great, we want to be with that too. But also it wasn't forced. I remember one of the providers has said, we have 95% of this information ready already on all of our products. 95% on EPDs.
They are already self-imposed this conditioning.
They've been doing it for years because this is not a new concept. But now they've done the work. That means everybody gets the result. And this supplier is in every data center in the world, and I'm not exaggerating, which means that all of a sudden they open that data up, which they plan to do. Everybody has access to these products already, just like that. And then you start seeing that ripple effect in the RFP process. If I go out and say, do you have a carbon label? No. Okay, come back when you do. I'm buying from them. They will have that next week.
So, and I know that this is the ADHD question, but like shifting back to the software company that you run.
Yeah.
The genesis behind that was to help provide a tool for the industry so they could use it so you could have a higher adoption rate to be able to be on this page.
No, this happened to tie together, just like so many others, that they realized the Climate Accord is a way for us to unite on a common cause, and we're all going to do our own little parts.
Yeah.
Right? Because we didn't start this one to be an economic engine. We did not. We did this as a community to drive a sustainability result. And what comes from that? Economic prosperity. Everybody's going to make money at this stuff. Awesome. Great. Go to town. Go design a better widget, and we'll buy more from you. Awesome, because that'll drive everybody else to drive a better widget again. But from my standpoint, I did 30 years in the industry as an end user. Right, started on my 21st birthday, ended on my 51st birthday. I started doing advisory work, joining boards, and that kind of thing. And one of them was a company called Virtual Power Systems. And Peter Gross is the chairman of that board, and he invited me to come in and actually do that. And I'd done analysis with them a couple different times at different companies, and it wasn't aligned. It wasn't ready yet. Anyways, I joined the board because I love the concept. And then we ended up doing a CEO change, and the investors asked if I would step in as the interim CEO. And I said, no. No, I'm good. I actually like what I'm doing like this. You have me already. I'm an active, working board member. But they asked, so I stepped in as interim CEO in February of 2020. And then the pandemic hit. And then I had way too much fun. Think about that. In the pandemic. It's a software company. So, and I believed what the opportunity was. And I'm going to tie it back to the metrics I was just sharing. 7 million data centers, 105 gigawatts capacity, right? 2.4% of energy draw globally. But if you look at that 105 gigawatts, right now there's at least 37 gigawatts of power stranded. At least 37 gig. If we assume 60% utilization across two of these categories that we actually
Which is probably high.
It is. Yep, it's lower than that. But we did that. That's 37 gigawatts. That means there's $227 billion worth of capital investment not yielding the return it could. More importantly, this is a little dirty secret of our industry. We have airplanes that are half full all the time, and we keep building more airplanes. That analogy back into data centers, and it's because of what you hit on, the RFP process. That's my data center. It's dedicated. No one can touch my lineup, and I want to lowest cost, etc. That's mine. Okay. Well, that means that all these customers have dedicated capacity that can't be shared, and then that inefficiency comes across because it's stranded. I just did a 10 megawatt zone and I only used 6. There's 4 megawatts stranded. And where this really hit me is I was in Ashburn with Buddy Reiser. And I said, so tell me about the capacity, because they're out, right? Dominion Energy can't give energy. You heard it in the conference.
That's the whole message.
And so, and I said, so tell me the numbers. He goes, well, publicly we've got 2 gigawatts worth of capacity for
the future.
No, out. Like they have 2 gigawatts that people are allocated within the data center alley. Okay, 2 gigawatts. And I said, how much is used? He goes, 1.2 gigawatts. Okay, so think about that. 1.2 gigawatts of 2 gigawatts. There's 800 megawatts stranded in Virginia. Virginia cannot get more power for 2 to 5 years.
That's a completely different problem, though. How do you solve for that one?
We have to rethink it. So what does Cato do? Cato Digital is the rebranding of Virtual Power Systems. We did that right before the Climate Accord because we're a software company that virtualizes the power plane.
That makes more sense because I wasn't tying. I knew VPS years ago. Peter had mentioned to me. I think I met one of the original founders too.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it was the same based on the
So we've exited hardware. We are focused 100% on software. So our partners are Schneider and QES and others, and they build the hardware and we orchestrate. But my mission in this is that what's our contribution to the Climate Accord? Can we go back and unlock that power? 37 gigawatts capacity globally? So we've got the constraint. Mark talked about this. That constraint is scarcity. Well, that scarcity, when you really pull back the curtain and look, half the capacity is not used. And what's happening? Dominion is thinking of clawing back that power.
But can they? If it's not used because it's protected on an SLA where you're, if it's
apparently they can. I just heard this 2 weeks ago.
Well, wouldn't that put some of those operators in violation of SLAs?
But they're in violation of consumption of what's allocated. Anyway,
what about the ones that have oversubscribed anyway to their backplay, and then they're even doubly screwed, right? Because
So here's the thing. Like our software basically goes and says, today we sell one product in the industry. It's a 5.9 SLA, right? With this efficiency, right? This term. And the behavior is that procurement says, well, I have to have it this way. So there's oversubscription, but at risk. We're helping the data center companies actually offer a second product. A 2.9 SLA.
Which is necessary.
Yeah, because it's just like cloud. When you use cloud today, you choose what you want. But they don't have a single product. They have the ability to do a 5.9 SLA, which is basically reserved capacity, and then they have spot. It's a 2.9 SLA. And it goes away. Mm-hmm. So at least 20% of the global like applications can use a 2.9 SLA.
I agree. I think that's the better answer, is figuring out what could be allocated and shifted differently.
Yeah. But the difference here is a chicken and egg. We right now do not offer the product to the industry. So data centers offer one thing. Why do they offer that? Because the customers are saying, I must have X. They define it. The procurement team's forced to get that because that's what their directives are. If all of a sudden you now are able to say in the RFPs, by the way, I have 2 products. I'm going to solve your 5.9 thing here. We also have a 2.9 product. It's 40% cheaper. Here's your economics, right? 40% cheaper. What do I have to do with that? It's a 2.9 SLA, which means you could be down up to 7.3 hours a month. Do you have applications that can work that way? That will open the dialogue past procurement, because procurement's going to say, look at this opportunity for savings. The engineering teams are going to look at it and say, what do I have to do with it? Oh, you have to tie in an actual trigger system from software. Oh, you mean like I already have in cloud today? Yes. Why are we not doing that? It's a chicken and egg problem right now.
So this is what I would say.
Yeah.
I love this because I think anybody that's going to listen to this, and there's going to be people that play on every aspect. If this is baseball, there's going to be people in the outfield listening. There's going to be people behind home base.
Yeah.
My thing is, I think that you guys have really done something special. And I think the first step is doing what you said you did, which was talking to the enterprise end users, because everything that happens, even the flow of people transitioning jobs in and out of this industry, typically follows the flow of cash as it's going into the money, into the industry, right? So people move. But this is great because you have operators and end users that are now in agreement. Where's the blind spot? Who do you think brings these products online for the operators, right? So are those operators' procurement teams going to also go out and be like, hey, we're going to make not concessions or suffer inconveniences, but we're also willing, because some of them may not have the same investors or infrastructure real estate asset groups that are sitting on 13-year exits, or you're going to have people that these operators are still going to need to go. And they're going to have to make the same sort of they're going to have to engage in a similar fashion. Is the way that the relationships are growing stronger and healthier, more collaborative between the operators and the end users. The operators are going to have to be sophisticated too, and let that continue to transcend beyond. Don't you agree?
I agree. And so if you think of sustainability, it's all about scope 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
3 is the entire supply chain aspects of it, ripple all the way down, which means that when a Google requires carbon labels from a mechanical device that's going to be put in a data center, that supplier is going to go back to their suppliers and require EPDs on the information that's in there. Those suppliers are going to go back to their suppliers and then to their actual manufacturing suppliers. It's the ripple effect. But what starts it? There has to be a trigger at the front. Who's buying it and what do they want? And that will start to go down the chain. Because one person's scope 1 is another person's scope 3.
I totally agree. I think that it's not 1, 2, and 3. I think it's 1 through 10, right? And I think that it is. I mean, because if you look at this, there's powerhouse companies on here, and those people have a lot. The 800-pound gorillas are all listed, but
but also small companies, software companies to investment firms, sidewalk infrastructure partners, right? GI partners, there's money behind it. There's service companies. There's data center providers. There's technology companies, right? It's what's neat is this needs to be the 500 companies, and it will.
No, I agree, and I think that this will be over the course of time. As the more that the information is rolled out in Interglobus Magazine, hopefully platforms. I'm sure you're on multiple podcasts, and you have your own everything. You're omnipresent. So I think it's just a function of conditioning and getting people more used to it and understanding it. Even guys like me, it'll take me time to understand.
Does it make a little more sense?
Listen, I'm gonna have to read it 7 times because I went to public school, but I'll say
so did I.
Let me say this. This is cool because then it puts the responsibility on us in the ecosystem. The reason why we run DCAC the way we do is, we are paying for that event through the sponsors of the ecosystem, but they're paying to listen to people like you guys talk about what your visions are. So they're like, shit, that's what we shouldn't be investing into doing these things. We think that this is what they want, but this is really what they want. Yeah. And that's why they have to hear. And the stage is an opportunity to hear top level, but the networking that takes place is everything below the waterline where you're like, no shit, give me the real stuff. Like,
That's
what is
the double click into
does that
it.
make
Yep.
sense?
Oh yeah, totally. It's really the conference you put together is powerful for a couple of reasons. I'll just give you my perspective.
Yeah, I would love to hear it.
First, it's not a sales-a-thon, right?
Mm-mm.
Sure, there's vendors there, that kind of thing, but it is truly a networking event that allows people to come together and have real conversations.
Otherwise, they would not be able to meet you. Those guys aren't typically in the room of 40. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that could help and they can contribute. We just have to figure out a way to find a glide path that they could discover because they want to help. They just don't know how. Like, I want to help more guys from Liberia. I just didn't realize that if I, as smart as we may be, not from a function of economics, but he could probably take them higher or wider or deeper than I can based on the massive infrastructure team that you have that has, I mean, how many people does it touch around the world, right? So,
yep, there's a voice here, and it's the voice of the community. But I will say, let me tie back to your military analogies. When you think of a team that comes together, it's a complementary team. They're not all the same. They all have different skill sets, and they are helping each other. And so that's I see you guys, AFCOM, 7x24. Every one of us have a purpose, but we have the same objective. I think. How do we get more people in this industry and make it thrive, make it more efficient, right? Make it more diverse, make it more effective, make it more sustainable. And so all of us are working together to create our own little ecosystem of digital infrastructure. Not one company, one organization can actually solve it.
So for anybody that's listening right now, and what's the one thing you want to make sure you leave them with on the Accord, that because it's not for them to learn and know everything about it on this, but it's for them to know where they could go find the information first, and then why they want to invest their time in understanding it. What would be the message you would tell the people watching and listening?
I would say go to climateaccord.org. We're about to launch that tomorrow. First, right? And so the information's in there. And I would say that sign up. There's no cost to sign up. It is
just take the
free.
pledge, make the commitment, and then over the time.
And you can sign up as your company, or you can sign up as an individual. Sorry. The point is, the more people we get behind this is where it really moves the needle. Because if you do not have passionate people that take the ball and run, it will sit right there. We can talk about that ball, but it will never roll. So if you pick that up and now bring it into your company, that things happen because now you're going to educate and drive.
Well, I'm hoping that if they're a CEO or if they're listening and they have a business, if they're not looking at that page, I mean, listen, people, if you're not reading this magazine and going to the page that you pull out and it has all these companies, just realize these are companies that are not only committed to the industry, they're committed to each other. Meaning like they probably won't use groups that aren't committed to or don't believe in the same things that they don't believe. So as I see this, I'm like,
especially those big brands that are public.
100%. I'm like, I think that if I'm going to want to stay in the game as the game grows, I'm going to have to be on this if I want them to let me do work with them. Probably, if I'm going to be a part of this downstream, I have to buy in.
I would say that pledging, for the Climate Accord itself, definitely is the first step. The second one is, though, how are you going to satisfy the requests that are coming in?
I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out.
This has to be so. Again, product companies, figure out how you're going to put your carbon labels on these things. How are you going to make your data accessible? Colo companies, figure out how you're going to be designing and building your data centers and sharing that information. Working with your GCs and everybody else to see how you can get that data. And so and then software companies, how do you go help this become a lot more effective and easy?
Like create something that aggregates the data on a dashboard that you can use.
What I love about these ideas is that there is so much innovation that's going to come out. Why? Because everybody's got now something to focus on. Secondly, we're going to let the engineers engineer.
Just let the industry solve for it.
Just give me the problem set, and I'll go do it. And then the business side, same thing. Give me what I'm trying to, the equation for what I'm trying to accomplish, and I'll go solve it.
Man, this has been awesome. And I know that we were rapid fire. We could have probably done this for 5-6 hours, right? I got 1,000 more questions.
Squirrel. Yeah.
It's not as much that. Yes, I mean, I'm sure like half the industry, we all have ADD, but the reality is if you're addicted to the impact that our industry has on the world, then you're gonna spend more than your fair share of time trying to understand it, right?
And most of our industry is that way. I don't think there's a lot of people that say I'm just doing this as a job. At least from what I've seen, there's a lot of passionate people that actually care.
I would say you're not only right, they're all passionate to some point, because it thins its own herd, I think, in this industry, which is
true.
I think
That's true.
I think that it's not a function of passion. I think it's a function of, like, there's companies that are going to look at this and they're going to see Google and they're like, I'm not like a Google, I can't be on this. But any company could probably be on this if they're in this industry, no matter how big or how small, right?
Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to say is we're creating the maturity model, and that maturity model is basically saying across products, power, and materials, you can measure where you are. And it's not to say if you're better or worse than other people, it's to show you where you are in the journey.
So you know what you have to work on.
Tom Furlong brought this up in our follow-up call about the climate accord. He said, this is great, but how does somebody do what Google's doing or Meta's doing? They're so much bigger. There's so much on there. But if all of a sudden we're given the guide on how to do it, and then you say, oh, I was able to solve these two things. Great. Next step, that one. Next step, that one. So maturity model, I can see how I will mature.
That's crazy.
That encourages everybody of every size to be able to say, I have a path and I have the means to do it.
Well, what I'd like to do, Dean, is I'd like to continue to track the journey, obviously, but as you are hitting, milestones and seeing the growth, or even blind spots that need to be addressed, that need to be broadcast out, with a broad stroke, I like to revisit it, and over the course of whenever you think it's the right time. It doesn't have to be, in the next few months. It'll be whenever you think it's the right time to explain to the industry again the shifts that need to take place, that everyone needs to, they don't have to buy into, but they get to if they want to be part of the success of the future, the growth of this space.
Yeah.
Let's bring this home, because I'm sensitive. I know you're getting ready to get on a plane, and this has been awesome. Like I said, I could do it forever. But what's the final message regarding the industry? Like, anybody that's listening, I have a final few questions I ask everybody. But what's the final message you want people to know about iMasons and your software company and all the amazing things you guys are doing to help multiple different communities? I mean, I was working with Lee on the impact that iMasons was doing with veterans, and I'll support Tony when he's doing it. I'll support anything I can to help a veteran. I think, what are the things that you want people to know about where you guys are at? Because you're doing so much that you guys, every time your head comes up, it's like a whole nother version of something that you guys are doing.
So we'd like to move the ball forward. Yeah,
exactly. So what's the message you want to leave with everybody right now?
I think it's pretty simple. Let me just, from the iMason standpoint, everybody should be involved. And I'm saying involved meaning become a member. Because, look, if wherever you are in your career, relationships matter.
100%.
Without the relationships and the network, it's very hard to get anything done. And also there's a lot less fulfillment.
Yeah.
At least from what I've seen. I mean, think about this. You and I met years ago, but now at your DCAC events, right? It's a blast. And you come together,
Who would have thought that some dopey service engineer? I was commissioned UPSs when I started, when I got in the military. I think I moderated a panel with you, Joe Cava, and Peter Gross last year.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is this shit for real? Because I used to read about you guys in magazines, and I was like, man, it'd be like me going out and shooting hoops with Jordan. But I think that there's a lot of guys here that they just don't know where to begin. Yeah. They don't know how to help. They don't know if this is for them. They don't know if this is for them, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I have a coin, I have a pin.
Yep. Now you have a hat.
Well, listen, man.
This is yours, man.
I appreciate it. And I'll wear it with a lot of pride.
Yeah. And I would say that iMasons is open to everyone in the industry, period, right? It is, because the builders of the digital age are every layer in our stack. I'm talking about from the accounting side all the way back to the engineering, to the sales side, to the business development, right? End user, supplier, provider, lawyers, think Jim Grice in our industry. He designs all these different things for sales, tax abatements, and that. That's our industry. It's everyone. So we should be coming back together, because together we're very strong. The voice that we can actually do, because we're going to compound the efforts of a lot of people by just being together. So I would say join. And it's up to you on how you want to participate. You can join the member resource groups. We have I Am Veterans, I Am Women, the Black MRG, Hispanic Latin X, Millennial Gen Z. These are groups where people can come together that are have like backgrounds to be able to say, I've got my community in the community, and help drive a lot of the initiatives. So I would say from an iMason standpoint, it's simple. Just become a member. Get involved with it to the level you want to, because look, we have our member meetings and we come together and we use their minds and experience. Every one of our member meetings, we have working sessions.
They could all contribute.
The working sessions are simply, we've got this problem, we'd like to get your input. And you're split up into these teams and you're sitting with people you may never have met before.
Of course.
And all of a sudden that network is just established. Why? Because we leave our companies at the door, we connect as individuals. That is, I want your experience, your know-how, and your ingenuity. And then that comes and they read out the content. And that drives a lot of our initiatives.
So let me say this. I've known of iMasons and you for years. The way that you just packaged it and said it probably just opened it up to much a broader stroke to now more people I think can identify that iMasons isn't just for this elite group of all these.
Absolutely not.
It's for everybody.
It is everyone in
But I
our
don't think
community,
people understood that, right?
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
So
Cool. Great.
let me ask you final two questions as I close out. The same questions I ask everybody. What do you tell people you do? Oh yeah.
I help build the underlying engine for the Internet of Everything.
Okay. And now, when did you create that message or that narrative? Was that something you started a long time ago, or is that?
It was kind of within the iMasons realm, When I worked at eBay, I had, a similar answer. It's like, we enable the engine of e-commerce,
Okay.
right?
Everybody's got a keyword, tricky phrase they use to codify what they do for a living.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by that. There's no wrong answer, but let me know when 3.0 version of that comes out too. I'll always try to add it to my lexicon. What's your advice to the 21-year-old kid who's going to start and could potentially spend the next 30 years on the end user side, regardless, but they could spend 30 years in industry? What's your advice to anybody? Because this podcast, the reason why we did the podcast, right, is why we did the conference. And I feel like the conference I wanted to have an environment that allowed a different exchange. And same for you. I mean, that's what you're doing with iMasons based on the way you just explained it. All the company logos are at the door, and it's just these people talking now.
Yep.
And now you're trading on your own professional IP as a professional, right? Now, I couldn't reach the military bases, which is the heart and soul of my community. There's
Sure.
2,400 veterans leaving the military every month. How do I catch them before they do?
2,400.
2,400. Yeah, I mean, we have.
Why the hell are we not getting them?
Does that make sense? It's the most untapped
What the
resource.
heck?
We go to the trades, we go to colleges, we go to all these things. I'm like, wait a second.
Oh.
There's people that are willing to die for each other that are coming out with aptitude and training on advanced weapons, machinery, technology, and hierarchy of how teams work. Why wouldn't I hire more of them?
It's a talent pool.
And the pressure testing they keep.
Yep, totally.
I said this on a few podcasts. Someone's like, there's Navy nukes and, Air Force. There's a million things. But I'm like, you would have never believed me if I told you, and I would have never believed it myself, that Army or infantry combat people make the greatest construction and tradesmen, in my opinion. And it's because they're not measuring mission critical and downtime. It's in mortality and death. So as they look at these problems, they're like, okay, hold on, settle down, everybody. Is anybody shooting at us? We're all going home tonight, right? All right, let's work through the problem. We're all going to be fine. The world keeps spinning.
Perspective,
context. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
And it's because the most chaotic situation, it's, Mike Tyson, quoted, everyone had a plan until I punched him once in the face. And in combat, people are like, look, this is our plan. And then all of a sudden shit hits the fan. They're like, all right, we still got to take the hill. But they keep pushing. And I'm like, they don't need to have construction backgrounds. They need to have the ability to push through challenges. So, going back to the advice, I don't care what your message is. And it's not targeted anybody. You could target anybody. But the reason why we have the podcast is so I could get onto the basis. That's why we have submarine commanders and COBs that are active duty coming to the conference now, because I'm like, this is an industry. It's not manufacturing, retail, auto. It's its own standalone, and it welcomes you. It's a million opportunities, and there's thousands of veterans leaving the military. Why don't we get them?
All right, so I'm going to give you two answers. For the 21-year-old, I said at the beginning of this conversation, it's about curiosity. And Sri Shivananda was, my boss at eBay Inc. And then when we were separating, and he has a thing that he says I look for EQ, IQ, and CQ.
What's CQ?
So emotional, right? And then you've got intelligence, and this is curiosity quotient.
I never heard that. I like it.
And the reason for that, and I never forgot this because I just looked back in my career. But that curiosity quotient, that's why the guy on the street that I was talking to, I'm reading into his potential. Not what he's telling me and the other stuff, but I'm just watching and listening to what he's saying about what he could do. And I could see it. Like it's crystal clear. The guy's motivated. He's in. He's personable. He's like all those little things.
He's driven. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's not. He's real. It was a very, very real message. I'm like, that's the kind of person we need to pull in. So my point, I think, to the 21-year-olds out there is that you don't know what you don't know right now. And I remember that, just like with me, I was going to go get a job and I was going to make all this money. I was freaking clueless.
Yeah, of course.
Then I went and I happened to an industry. We have an industry right now that will open, with open arms, right, bring people back in.
Yeah.
Because we need the talent. And then you've got groups like iMasons that are enabling a community to come together, that you've got support and you've got a network, and opportunities just suddenly open up because it's global.
Yeah.
And these people care, and it's the relationships. Military. I can't emphasize this enough. I was not allowed in the military. I was defective.
Take a number. They let me in.
Yeah. So, I was shot in the head, and I couldn't see, when I was 16, I think. So,
whoa.
And long story.
We missed that part of the story. Another podcast.
But the point is that I have such respect for the military and the people, and thank you for your service. Literally, everybody. Like you said, I've never been shot at. I've never been in a life-or-death situation. I've been in operational things where it's hit the fan completely, and I'd like to feel that I would be able to be good at that. Mm-hmm. But the fact that I have not had to be in there is because all these other people have helped us keep our freedom. That is huge. But that group of people, the fact that you said, how many? 1,300 a month?
So there's about 2,400 veterans that transition out of the military every month right now.
Got it. So that... Every one of the people that are coming out of that one, you should consider digital infrastructure. It is the future of everything. I don't care who it is. Machines, right? People.
I don't think there's a more thriving industry than ours right now. Still growing at a double-digit CAGR. Right?
And it will continue because the world, we have 2 to 4 billion people still not online. Not
only that, but we have all these new emerging technologies that are just going to be...
Yep.
On fire.
The data tsunami that's coming because mm-hmm. we're going to go from, 8 billion people and into 130 billion things with 1 trillion sensors behind them. That data wave is massive. So we need people. And I would say that from the military standpoint, it's very easy to go back and get this industry. You could go get a certification. Just get the basics. That's all you need. They mm-hmm. have the skills to go learn it. They've done it in the military already. Mm-hmm. Right? All the different trades can be applied. And then you can explore. And we know, take Salute Mission Critical, take all of the different companies that leverage them, take all the veterans in our industry sure. who are in leadership positions or in operational positions. They know what they're getting, and they want that. We need to fill that pipeline. So apply for the scholarships, become a member, right? Because I believe the military and students are free.
Tell you what we're doing. We're going to put together like a DoD skill bridge program, which will allow us to gain access to these folks. Maybe you guys could collaborate with us on creating 100%. That content, because that's what's really lacking. And then we could get access to these candidates months before they even leave active duty. Yeah. Uncle Sam will literally give them to us and pay for all. We can't even pay them if we wanted to. And that's so they could be immersed and discover that, hey, at the end of this 3, 4, 5 months, whatever, this is what I want to do. And then day one, they're gone. And I'm doing that myself. Like I had a guy that I was doing my own unofficial thing and I was paying him. He was active duty. I'm like, I'm going to give you a little bit of money every month until mm-hmm. whatever. And when he retired on Friday, Monday, he was on staff with us. You know what I'm saying? But we had to do it, but let's create something that's repeatable. You know? And it's out there. It's just
I think it's going to be awareness, education, as well as the process to enable that to happen. So let me make a commitment to you. Mm-hmm. If you need me to be at a base, to talk to anybody,
sure,
to present to whatever, I'm wide open. I would.
Can you speak into the mic a little louder when you say that? No, I'm joking.
Sir, yes, sir. I shall. Yes.
I'm definitely going to take you up on that because listen. So this is one of the things that's going to be announced here in a little bit regarding DCAC. The DCAC Live conference is it's personally, I mean, I love going to tech conferences still because there's so much to be gained at every one of these, but they're so much different. There's the value of going to all of them. Yeah. Just because you go to one doesn't mean you shouldn't have to go to the others. There's something gained that's unique to each one.
Yep.
For me, I love doing the golf tournament day mm-hmm. one of our conference because then we kick off the networking that night. But there's a lot of non-golfers, and you were able to lead a really cool thing. You teamed with Enchanted Rock, which is a very awesome group. I'm looking for. I'm gonna have their CEO on here eventually.
Yeah.
And my thing is there's people that golf and the people like me that don't. And what are you gonna do during the day? And that what you guys put together was, I think someone from your team reached out. And I was like, I think I was moving a million miles a minute, but all I said was, hell yes, figure out whatever it takes.
Yep.
Here's my team. If I can help in any way, let me know, but make sure you guys connect and tie that together.
And we did. Yep.
But the thing is why can't I do that? I think that what we're looking to do now is we helped 4 veteran groups at this one conference. And how do I help more? So
amazing.
So every quarter I'll still do a 1-day charity golf tournament. I'll do one in probably outside Norfolk, Virginia. I'll do one outside Naval Station San Diego, and we'll do one outside Fort Hood. And it'll be a combination with day 1 golf tournament with an introduction to technology in the evening, set networking event. Day 2, I'll probably end up getting 5 to 10 different people that are hiring, like a Rosedin, an IES, a DataBank, whoever, and have them come, and I'll have 100 to 200 military people.
You're bringing a talent pool to them?
That are screened months in advance. We work with these people. So you could show up and you're like, I can need 2 people, I need 50 people. And you could show up and we'll have 200 pre-screened candidates that the pump has been primed, and you get to educate them that first night. And day 2 is I'll set it up to where it's like there's a dating thing, like there's suites and people just go through and there's schedules and they just go through, and when you're done, you've met 30 candidates and they've met 5 companies, and everybody gets to figure out who's falling in love with who, because we're all going home with a match. It's again, we didn't do this to make money. We did it to make a difference. Same with that, right? If I could create a little bit of that too, then that solves your existential threat. We put more talent in this space, and when we put more resources in here, we could grow faster as an industry.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Absolutely.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say or leave that I didn't get a chance to ask you? Because I know I asked you a zillion questions.
I would say from the company standpoint, last one is that anybody who's got data center stuff right now, the colos themselves, ask yourself one question. What is my power capacity effectiveness?
And if they don't know, they could call you?
The simple thing for that is that how much power have I built? How much capacity have I built? How much is used? And
nobody knows. I mean, very few people have put the time and effort into understanding that, right?
I think it's a very easy number to get. And every executive, look at it. Because in the end, it's going to drive a different behavior. If you are at 37% utilization of an asset, which is not an exaggeration.
I believe you.
Because it could be the RFP process and those kind of things, you need to rethink. So Cato is here to go back and help sell more capacity, drive up utilization, increase efficiency, and lower cost for customers without impacting the margin of the provider. That stuff, go to cato.digital, reach out, Dean at cato.digital, and I would love to share that too. So this is my other contribution to the Climate Accord, because if we can go back and avoid building more data centers because we're using what we have, we solve a lot of those capacity constraints we got right now.
I love it, man. Dean, this is awesome. This whole thing has been awesome. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you. And thanks for your
coming
service.
I appreciate it, man.
All right. And enjoy your hat.
Oh, I can't wait. I'll wear it on the way home.